It is now 6:30, so it's time to call the August 31st, 2009 meeting of the Anchorage Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Rick Morrison.
Here.
Nancy Pease.
Here.
Jim Frederick. Connie Yoshimura. Tony Jones.
Here.
Arthur Isham.
Here.
John Littleton.
Here.
Ruth Phelps. Stacy Dean.
Here. Is your microphone on, Ms. Dean? Yes? Okay. We have a quorum. Ms. Yoshimura has been excused from this evening's meeting. She was previously determined to have a conflict of interest and has been excused. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the June 15, 2009 meeting. Before we actually take that item up, I would like to take an opportunity here to welcome our two new planning commissioners, Stacy Dean and Rick Morrison. We welcome you this evening. Since the entire matter that we're dealing with this evening relates to the case number 2009-090, which is discussion and potentially action on the Hillside, the element of the comprehensive plan for the Hillside District Plan. I'll start with you, Ms. Dean. Did you receive a copy of the tapes from the hearing and the materials and have an opportunity to listen to the tape and review the record in this case?
I did have the tapes. I did review the tapes, and I was able to read through the minutes at the same time so I could see what was going on. I also did skim all of the HDP. I read a couple of the chapters. I did not read it cover to cover. I did read a lot of the comments that came in the other packets and some of the suggested changes that people had made.
Okay. Do you feel prepared to participate in the discussions?
I think every day you could read something new.
Okay. Mr. Morrison, did you have an opportunity to review the materials and to listen to the minutes from the meeting?
I did. I've been through the tapes. I've been through the summary returned from from staff. I did not get the written comments. So I should say that again, I have not been through the written comments that came back and read through as much of the paperwork as I could, considering it was a lot in a short time. But I feel prepared to participate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda then is the June 15, 2009 minutes.
Madam Chair, I move for approval of the minutes of June 15, 2009 of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, I have Mr. Weddleton in the queue. Mr. Weddleton?
I had a couple minor changes.
Okay. Go ahead.
On page 6, the small one, at the end of the first full paragraph, it says, "in meetings with the community council." And in fairness to Mr. Beck, it was with the community councils, quite a few of them many times. And also on page 7, in the middle of the first full paragraph, the one that begins with transportation goals, the fourth to the last sentence, it says, expand the boundary of the existing water sewer service area west to Elmore. It actually, I believe, moves east to Elmore. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's it.
Okay, did you get where that correction was, Madam Secretary? Okay. Thank you. Was that all of the corrections you had?
That's all.
Okay. Anyone else have any corrections or changes? Hearing and seeing none. Is there any objection to approval of those minutes with those changes noted? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda are disclosures. Mr. Isham, could you please handle them for us?
Ms. Dean, do you have anything to disclose this evening?
No, I have not. I don't live on the hillside.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Please.
Yes, just for the record, I wanted to say that I did talk to the consultant, Chris Beck, Agnew Beck, about a couple of the thinking behind the Fall Creek and parks and phasing, those issues sort of broadly, not about the specifics of those issues. And I will sort of, when we get to those points, tell what I learned. And then I have a couple of documents that I pulled out of my archives that bear on a couple of the cases, so I'll introduce those when the time comes.
Thank you. Ms. Jones?
No disclosures this evening.
Okay, Mr. Morrison.
In trying to get my arms around the issue that's coming before us, I have spoken to one of the representatives of the mayor's office. My mind's going blank. I heard it.
Is your microphone turned on?
Is it on? The green light's on.
Good. Okay.
I also have spoken to a couple of people who live on the hillside, of which didn't know anything about the program that was going on or the issue that was in front of us, which was kind of interesting. And then had meetings with the planning department for my first briefing. And other than that, I have no business up there or anything else to disclose.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Weddington.
I don't have any real conflicts, but I wanted to just briefly touch on some things I disclosed previous times that we've talked about this, and I've had lengthy involvement with this from time as a board member on HALO and the Community Council, and then as a citizen member of the Oversight Committee and of the Citizens Advisory Committee until the time I came on this commission.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll let the record reflect Mr. Phelps has arrived.
Mr. Phelps, do you have anything to disclose this evening?
I do work for the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, and aspects of the proposed plan this evening do border onto Chugach State Park, and there are a number of recommendations that the department has a strong interest in. I believe I maintain impartiality, but I'm letting the commission know that I do work for the department.
Thank you. And I have nothing to disclose, although I did not attend the first public hearing on this. I have listened to the tapes at length driving on my commute from Eagle River, and those have burned into my brain, so I think I'm ready to do what has to be done.
Thank you. Well, for the benefit of our new commissioners and for folks in the audience this evening, I'm going to ask our staff members to introduce themselves and let us know their job descriptions, and especially one of our new staff members who's closest to the door.
Madam Chairman, this evening we have quite a few staff here. We have Greg Jones, who's the new director of the Office of Community Planning and Development. We have myself, Jerry Weaver, the acting planning director, Lance Wilbur, the traffic director, Tyler Robinson, the physical planning manager, and Joanne Contreras. We also have some other staff in the audience as well, but Greg may want to say a couple words here.
Okay. Mr. Jones, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here in yet another role. I've been here in so many.
Yes, you have.
I'm here primarily tonight to observe. I know this has been a long process that I haven't participated in detail. I've been briefed by the staff, looked at the documents, and just watching with interest. This is a yeoman's effort on both the part of the staff and the community, as well as the commission, in terms of the amount of work that's been done on this today. So I'm just here to watch.
Well, we're glad to have you here, Mr. Jones, and we know that you've put in many hours sitting here till midnight on this side of the table in many different capacities. Okay, which now we have arrived at item E, which is the unfinished business portion of our agenda, which is case number 2009-090. That's the element of the comprehensive plan for the Hillside District Plan. The public hearing is closed on this matter. After the public hearing was closed, we extended the comment period for some time and allowed people to submit additional comments. And staff has taken all of the comments that were made by the public and by planning commissioners and have crafted issue response summary. And now is the time for the Planning Commission to go through and begin addressing the various concerns that were raised during the hearing and issues that have also been raised by staff and planning commissioners as well. Our traditional way that we go about this is generally to function as a committee of the whole. If it's the desire of the group to proceed that way this evening, it's my understanding we'll be functioning off of 3 memoranda that we have been presented with. The first being the main issue response memorandum, which is the big document. Then the second is the short memorandum that had the map attached that was mailed out to us that looks like this. This was the one we received in the mail toward the end of last week. And then there was one laid on the table tonight that's called the third of 3 memos, and it's pertaining to the issue response. Then we also had laid on the table tonight copies of some comments about the issue response that were submitted by Mr. Weddleton and Ms. Pease. Ms. Pease submitted 2 documents. One is 6 pages long, dated August 28th, and one is 10 pages long, dated August 30. Mr. Weddleton submitted one memoranda dated today's date. Now, I have a question for Mr. Robinson. How do you think that it makes the most sense that we go through these issue response? Start with the big one?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My thoughts are, and I want to just provide a little bit of background on the map so you know what you're looking at in terms of the new maps. But yes, for the most part, the numbering in the larger document with the cover memo dated August 31st are the issues as we heard them through written comments and public testimony on June 15th, and we tried to leave those comments intact to the best degree possible, but we put a number, an alphabetic and number next to each one of those comments. So I would suggest going through that. Now, that said, the second memo that you have that just says Hillside District Plan Land Use Plan Map, we would not normally have provided you a second map at this stage where we would have described any changes to the recommendations in that map. However, that was getting a little bit confusing. So that map actually includes the staff recommended changes that you'll see in the narrative. So the land use plan map in that memo 2 differs from the public hearing map, but it's consistent with staff's current recommendations. The other maps in the third document, the roads and trails map, contain the same content, but they're provided at a different, sort of a different level of clarity. And the Built Green Infrastructure map, the same thing goes for that map. The sewer boundary maps reflect a revised change to the Furrow Creek boundary, and they're also included to hopefully be a little clearer on where that line is drawn. So that's the issue with the maps. In addition, that second memo contains a few technical corrections that I would just consider as you go through. If you feel like you need to bring them up, I would bring them up, as you would any issue response. They're not numbered, but they are primarily technical catches. And then the third memo references the same issues as numbered in the original issue response. So I think it adds one new one on a state park issue, but for the most part, what you're going to see is consistent numbering. It's just a slight revision based on further conversations. So not to have muddied the water too much, but we do think probably the best thing is just to go through the numbers, but keep those changes in mind as you do so.
Okay. One last question before we begin. What type of a time frame are we looking at for us completing our work?
Well, it would be staff's hope that you deliberate on the majority of issues here tonight. If there are a few issues that require some follow-up information, we would be happy to do that. But our desire is for you to make your recommendation to the Assembly on this plan, and for us to move the plan to the Assembly sometime this fall. So, in addition to that, we certainly don't have, it's not our intent to reanalyze issues, but we are willing to play around with some words here and there if that's the desire of the body that makes your deliberation go a little bit faster tonight.
Okay. Well, I don't think it's any of our intent here on the Commission to begin grinding sausage. And doing real close wordsmithing, but we'll get as far as we can. This is a pretty big document. Okay.
Madam Chair,
yes.
I move that we go into committee of the whole for this discussion.
Okay. Is there a second? And I'm going to ask you folks, for the most part, at least in the formal mode, to use your buttons. Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Is there any objection? Hearing none, we are now in the committee of the whole. And you have the vote recorded, Madam Secretary? All right. Yes, it did. I just wanted to make sure you had it all recorded and could. Mr. Weddleton, I see you in the queue.
A couple of things. I had a few questions for staff, and then I have another page I'd like to hand out as well, which will come up fairly quickly.
Okay.
Let me do it now?
You can.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you have enough to give staff copies to? Well, we need to be sure we have some for them.
That's what I emailed earlier. Thanks.
Okay. All right. We'll just put this in our pile of the comments for now, John. Is that correct?
I just wanted to be at least half as many as Nancy.
Okay. All right. So now we're starting with the big issue response summary. Big.
Are we going through this like page by page? Is that the idea?
Yes, and if there's no objection, we can, like we've done in the past, if there's no objection and agreement, we can move on. If people have issues with things, then we can note that, but we'll go through and identify what we need to address, and then come back and go through those, if that's okay. Mr. Weddleton, you're back in the...
Well, I had a few questions that don't specifically hit any single one of the issue response points that I was hoping to hear a little bit on before we got into those. Okay? On the June 15th memo that came with the first packet, on page 8, there was a recommendation for the land use plan map that Legacy Point Tract A have a note that says in these areas increased density may be allowed up to 2 DUA under controlled development. So that, now I don't see that looking at the land use plan map that we were given. It looks exactly the same color as everything else. The preferred light yellow.
Through the chair, Commissioner Weddleton, I'm not sure if you want me to answer this question based on the original map or the revised recommendations, but I think for clarity, probably give you a little bit of an overview of the plan map. The first plan map that was in the public hearing draft had a residential intensity level of basically less than 1 dwelling unit per acre, and then the next one was 1 to 5 dwelling units per acre. And that was consistent with what we've done sort of borough-wide. One of the comments we heard was to rethink essentially whether 1 to 5, given that the hillside is primarily low density, maybe it was more appropriate to break that up into 2 ranges. And so we did that, and what we brought back to you, and that's the part of that second memo, and it's accompanied by towards the end of the land use section, the issue response, a narrative of what explains what we've done there. But the new map has a number of changes, one of which is adding that second category. When you add that second category, you have to look a little more specifically at both what's existing developed as well as what is planned developed, especially those undeveloped areas. And the legacy, the area of legacy point is currently, it has an approved development plan that is actually 3.8 dwelling units per acre. However, it's premised on the fact that it be senior housing. The rationale of how we got to that during the research was that there's less impact on a clustered senior housing development than there would be on a traditional single-family development, even one that's clustered. And so, backing out of that, we looked at similar development in the area, in the lower part of our area, and really found that the other developments were somewhere between 2 and 3 DUA. And so the recommendation for legacy, first there's an acknowledgement that if that development goes forward, it's an approved development and it would be at a 3.8 DUA as currently permitted. If it doesn't and develops more along the lines of single-family development, we found the 1 to 3 to be consistent.
Okay, so you changed, there won't be a note on this, and that's what we see in this new one is correct, in the new land use plan map.
No, I think we just go, I mean, unless we feel like we need to acknowledge the sort of, that the existing approved development actually exceeds the 1 to 3, then we would put that on there and just make sure that we're not suggesting that not go forward if that's what actually happens.
That's fine. I just want to make sure it wasn't missed on there. Okay, then early in your narrative, there's a lot of discussion about kind of the role that this would play. It will supersede some plans, and then ultimately a lot of it needs to create changes in Title 21 for it to be really effective. So I want to know a couple of plans in particular. How would this affect the pedestrian plan? Would this trails plan get rid of the pedestrian plan? Does the pedestrian plan supplement this?
Through the chair, this would not have any effect on the pedestrian plan. The trails plan in the document would replace the hillside portion of the area-wide trails plan, but this plan would not supersede those other elements of the comprehensive plan that are intended to be, those functional elements and deal with those pieces.
Okay, so if there's a trail or path on the pedestrian plan that's not on this trails map, then it's still part of the pedestrian plan, or still part of the comprehensive plan.
Through the chair, this is Lance Wilbur, Director of the Traffic Department, Commissioner Weldon. I believe that, the trails elements of this are, as Mr. Robinson mentioned, is just to reflect the changes to the area-wide trails plan. If there are pedestrian connections inside the pedestrian plan that are not illustrated here, and there probably are, there are many plans or connections probably at a neighborhood level that are not illustrated here. And so the pedestrian plan would still, as adopted, continue to be the adopted plan.
Okay, good. Thank you. So moving on to another plan, the much older Rabbit Creek Greenbelt plan apparently said that west of Buffalo there would be no trail along the creek. And this trails plan shows a trail there. And so then I believe a comment from Ms. Contreras said that this would supersede the Rabbit Creek Greenbelt plan. So to what extent would that, so is the Rabbit Creek Greenbelt plan completely gone and this plan replaces it, or are there some parts that are still in play and some that aren't?
If I may, I believe both the Rabbit Creek Greenbelt plan and the area-wide trails plan are both elements of our comprehensive plan. The general practice is that in the event where there is conflict, the more recent plan will govern. Since the area-wide trails plan is more recent than the Rabbit Creek Trail plan, the trails on this map should reflect that particular plan. On the other hand, a Greenbelt plan is a much different plan than a simple trails plan. I mean, it talks about establishing a greenbelt, which is a little bit different than simply, acquiring access to a trail. So my wonderful answer is they both would still apply.
Okay, good. Thank you. On the commercial area has been shrunk down to essentially the existing commercially zoned lots down at Old Seward Highway and Rabbit Creek. Now, is it possible on those there was talk of an overlay district when it was a larger area. Now that it's just the existing commercially zoned properties, can you put an overlay district on those?
Through the chair, the recommendation based on the feedback was to reduce that area to how that area is currently zoned, and that's reflected in the revised land use plan. Staff's additional recommendation is that there are existing special limitations on 2 of the 3 parcels. The third parcel is zone B1A, which is designed for small-scale residential. So inherent in that zoning district, there are some limitations, potentially not as many limitations as what some of the testimony would imply. But we felt that basically an overlay district would not be warranted. As an overlay district, you do go forward with a rezone as well. So presumably you will need permission of the property owners as well to move forward, at least the majority of those property owners. But again, we felt that for what can happen already on the Burn Sanctuary, they could move forward with that, and the other 2 properties could be in sort of fit the context of that area, and felt like it wouldn't be necessary to add another regulatory sort of impediment on existing landowners.
So you don't recommend an overlay district, but is it legally possible to do it?
I believe it would need to be same 1.75 acres, and there is the acreage in that area.
Okay, right. This is the last one on this. In the issue response, you referred to the soon-to-be-completed municipal trail standards. And I haven't seen that, but I'm a little bit familiar with the trail standards for Far North Bicentennial Park. And my understanding, that was going to be a prototype for the citywide. Is that correct? Or is it totally separate?
I believe that some of the classifications will be used. The trail standards that will be moving forward will be in the next update to the area-wide trails plan. So that's where you're going to see the trail standards. And once the PED plan has been adopted, the bike plan is coming before you soon. The next plan slated to be is the sort of triumvirate of non-motorized trails planning would be the area-wide trails plan. And that's where you would see them. To the degree to which all of them or just some of them are brought forward, I'm not sure.
Do you know when that might be?
We could confirm with Nance, but I believe that planning is the non-motorized trails coordinator is sort of starting, but I think it would probably take up much of next year, the planning for that.
All right, thank you.
Does that conclude your questions?
I'm ready to go item by item.
Okay. And Ms. Pease, I see you in the queue. Did you have questions?
Yeah, just a question or a comment before we go item by item, if I could.
Okay.
First, to follow up on Commissioner Weddleton's question about which of the existing adopted plans are overruled or superseded. There are also pedestrian connections and roads in the LRTP, and I'm assuming that the road map to be adopted and the LRTP, and the trails map to be adopted in this document are intended to overrule those parts of the LRTP. Is that correct?
Commissioner Pease will confirm through Mr. Wilbur, but I don't believe that this plan has any impact on the long-range transportation plan.
Okay, that's a little confusing because it means that the trails plan does supersede parts of the Greenbelt plan, does supersede area-wise trails plan, and you said that the latest plan generally is the dominant plan if there's a conflict, but not the LRTP. So that's really important to clarify, I think.
Well, I think what we have is we have a number of functional plans, a number of geographic-specific plans, but what this plan is intended to do is be very explicit on the areas that it's intending to sort of take forward. But for the most part, we really wouldn't expect the district plan to deal with the trails network. However, it was rolled into the scope of this project. There was a level of detail done, and it felt like this could adequately represent at least the map portion of the area-wide trails plan in this process. Normally, that said, there are always going to be conflicts. You all see this every day in your deliberations. And where we've tried to be, specific is if there, for example, on Anchorage 2020, this plan both implements Anchorage 2020 and Anchorage 2020 and this plan remain elements of the comprehensive plan. But there are policies in Anchorage 2020. One, for example, says to look for, establish an urban-rural boundary. This plan looked at the issue and basically makes the statement that it decided that an urban-rural boundary is not the appropriate way forward. So it's trying to be explicit at something that would otherwise be an obvious conflict. My advice to you is if you all see conflicts here tonight with other elements of our comprehensive plan, we would like to know about it, and if we address it now, then I think we alleviate some of those issues down the road.
Okay.
I have another, two questions, I guess. Well, one's a comment. I haven't had a chance to read this third memo that was given to us tonight, so I think they're mostly roads issues, and I don't know if we're going to try to cover the whole roads chapter, but I'd like a little time to digest that. And then finally, with, I guess it's really issue G1, so I guess that's all.
Okay, thank you. Mr., do you have questions, Mr. Phelps?
Yeah, I have a question, actually.
Okay.
Okay. I guess one of the concerns that I had was about the discussion we just had a moment ago about the relationship of this plan to the long-range transportation plan. We didn't mention the OS&HP, but I think there may be more of a relationship with the OS&HP than the long-range transportation plan. So like Ms. Pease, I would like to get into that particular issue when it comes up into this review process. The other is a statement of concern. I am concerned about the number of items laid on the table that I have not gone through, and I haven't counted the pages, but it would not surprise me if it's not the range of 20 and 25. It might be appropriate to do what we can this evening, and then for some of these issues that have not dealt with by staff, that we postpone this to a date certain to deal with those issues at that time. I think if you're a little bit uncertain about going through and making final recommendations on stuff that's just laid on the table. And that policy is pertinent to the Commission as well as to everybody else.
About not laying stuff on the table at the last minute. It is true. Okay, we are back to Mr. Weddleton.
Well, I wasn't up to speak, but I guess I could start.
Well, you were in the queue first to start going through issues.
Oh, okay.
So you didn't lose your position.
Well, maybe I'd refer to Commissioner Isham that I think previously we've gone through and listed the issues that we wanted to pull.
That's correct, and that's what
Okay.
I
And you want me to
anticipated doing now, was
Okay.
going through the big document, the one dated August 31st, and we can start going through them issue by issue. It starts with Chapter 1, Issue G1, and, and if people are okay with the issue response, the issue response, then we can move on. If people want to pull it, they just need to let me know. So,
Do you want to go issue by issue or
Yes.
go through and just list the ones I want to pull?
just list the ones you want to pull.
And then we'll hit those. Okay. Got your pen ready?
Yes, but I asked Mr. Isham, though, he's double-checked
Right.
me here.
Okay, I've got LU 5 and 6.
Okay, what page is that on?
Oh, shoot.
Can I point us by page, maybe?
Yeah,
We
maybe
might, I have
better.
enough for that might.
Pardon me?
That would be fine, too. You would
Okay,
Go page by
page 1. Anything on page 1?
For Mr. Weddleton, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, is this?
Or anybody else? Anybody have anything on page 1?
Yes, G1.
Okay, page 2. It's just is continuing on. Okay, page 3 starts issue, at the bottom is issue G2.
I have an issue on the top of the page on G1, on page 3.
Okay. Well, that's fine. Okay. Anything on G2 at the bottom of page 3?
I don't have any. I don't know what it's on here.
Or on page 4? What about issue G3 at the top of page 5? Okay, G4, it's on page 5.
Never mind.
No, okay. G5A. G5 and G5A on page 5. Okay. G5B on the top of page 6. G5C in the middle of 6. G5D, G5E.
Yes.
That was G5E, okay? G6, G6A.
Yes, G6A. I've got these two documents, so
Okay.
if I missed any, I'll just have to come back.
Okay.
That, yes.
G6B. G6C. I feel like I'm doing bingo. G6D. G6E. Okay, now we're on page 8. G7A. G7B. G7C. G7D. There is no G7E, but we have a G7F. Okay, now we're on Chapter 2, Land Use. LU1. That's on page 9.
Yes.
Okay. And
I'm not sure this falls, but I have an issue on page 10 that relates to LU1.
okay. And then there's the map on page 11.
I have questions not on the map that's been, replaces this map. So yes, I do have questions on the map.
Okay. Page 12. LU2. LU3. LU4. Page 13, LU5.
Yes.
Page, this same page, LU6.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to page 15, LU7. And it carries over to the very top of page 16.
Yes.
Okay. LU8 on page 16. Okay, LU9.
Yes.
Was that John? Okay. LU10. LU11.
Yes.
LU12. Okay. LU13 on the top of page 20.
Yes.
LU14.
Yes.
LU15.
Yes.
LU16.
Yes.
LU17.
Yes.
And yes.
LU18.
Let's see. What page are we on now?
Bottom of 22.
Nope. Nothing.
Okay, on 23, LU19.
Yes.
LU20.
Yes.
21.
Just a second.
So bottom of page 23, it's LU 21.
No.
No, okay. LU 22 on page 24.
Yes.
LU 23. Oh. And then LU 24. LU 25 on the bottom of page 24. Okay. LU 26A on page 26. LU 26B. LU 26C. LU 26D. LU 26E. LU 26F. LU 26G. LU 26H. I'm now on the top of page 27. LU 26I. LU 26J. LU 26K, and LU 26L. Okay. Now we're on the bottom of page 27 under maps, LU 27.
Yes.
Then we have another LU 27. We have two LU 27s. The second one deals with map 2.13. And then we have another issue regarding LU 27 to delete figure 2.11. That's at the top of page 28. And we also have LU 28. Okay. LU 29.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, it carries over to there. So that takes us up to Chapter 3. Watershed management and drainage issues.
LU 30, was there any,
I didn't see a 30.
okay, it's on page 31.
It is on page 31?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it is. Anything for 30? LU 30? I don't hear anything. Okay. Now we're on page 33 under watershed management and drainage issues, D1.
Yeah.
And who was that?
Me,
Bruce.
yes.
Okay, I thought it was a new voice. D2.
Yes.
D3. D4 on the top of page 34. D5. D6.
Actually, I have a D5.
Okay. D6. D7. D8.
Yes.
Yes. D9. D10. D8 I did. Oh, there's an 8A. Okay. D9, D10. Okay, we're at the top of 36. D11, D12, D13, D14.
Yes.
D14?
D14?
Okay. The top of page 38, D15.
Yes.
D16. D17.
Yes.
Okay, D18 on page 39.
Yes.
And D19 at the top of 40. D20?
Yes.
D21. D22?
Yes.
D23 on 41. D24A. D24B. Okay, we're done with Chapter 3. Chapter 4, Transportation and Roads. R1.
Yes.
I have a general policy issue that's not really in here, but I want to raise, so,
Go ahead and raise about roads.
yeah.
Then raise it now.
Okay. The issue for me is the relationship of this document to the official streets and highways plan, and how specifically it's going to be used in the planning process.
Okay. So, and when we get to discussing this section,
That's what I prefer, it's just a need to look at the section.
be thinking on it and be prepared to answer it at that time.
Yeah. And I would prefer that that answer come at the beginning of the discussion of this section.
At the beginning of the discussion of that section.
It's the
Okay.
general issue, actually.
Right, okay. Okay. And issue, let's see the next one, if I can find it here. Where are my little eyes?
It's page 48, R2.
Yeah, it's just way up there. Yes, R2 on 48. Anybody interested?
Well, yes, I think I'll cover it under R1, but it pertains to this. So, yes.
Okay, okay. And R3.
Yes.
And I think, yes.
Okay. And R4 on page 50. R5. R6.
To go back to R4, yes.
Okay. R6. R7.
Yes.
R8 on page 51.
Yes.
R9. R10, R11, R12, R13 on page 53. R14. R15.
Yes.
R16.
Yes.
R17. R18.
Yes.
R19. R20. R21. R22. Yes, there is. It's just not bold. R23. Okay. Now we're at Chapter 4, Transportation.
Madam Chair, I just, sorry.
Uh-huh.
I addressed R9 under one of my other questions, so R9, I have some changes that are pertinent to R9, so probably should flag that too, although we may have covered it by the time we get there.
Okay. All right, are we ready to go on to Transportation Trails?
Yes.
Okay, T1. T2 on page 58. T3.
Let's see. Yes, yes. Fine.
I think I have an issue on T2.
Okay. T4 on page 61.
I'm going to drop my concern on issue T2 and move it to T4.
Okay. I'll scratch you off T2. Although you could have it on both.
Whatever, fine.
T5. T6 at the top of page 62.
Yes.
T7. T8.
Oh, 7, I'm sorry.
T7? Okay. Okay, moving on to page...
I'll scratch that. That was one of my general questions.
Was T...
Yep, T7.
So scratch it?
Correct.
Scratch. Okay. And now I'm looking for T8. Where? Yes, there it is. T8. Okay. T9 near the bottom of page 63. Okay. And T10 on page 64. T11 at the bottom of 64. T12 at the top of 65. T13 at the bottom of 65. And T4...
T13, yes.
Okay. And T14 at the really close bottom of 65.
Can I go back to T11 and
Yes.
note that one?
You want that, Bruce?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, moving on from T14 to T15 on page 66. Okay, T16 on page 67. And I guess that's 16A.
I have an issue in T16.
That looks like 16A to me, Bruce. Or it's just 16, sorry, my eyes are getting tired. All right.
Looks like T16 to me.
Yeah, it does to me too. That's a colon, I just can't read. T17 on page 68. T18. T19. T20. T21A. T21B. Yes. T21C. Okay, now I'm on page 71. Oh, there's a 21D down at the very bottom of 69. Okay, now at the top of 71, water and wastewater issues, W1.
Let's see. Yes.
W2. W3 on page 72. W4.
Yes, I'll mark it, although we might get to it earlier than this in land use.
W4?
Yes.
Okay. W5.
Yes.
And yes.
W6.
Yes.
W7. On the top of page 74. W8. W9.
Yes.
W10.
Yes.
W11.
Yes.
W12. W13. W14. W15. W16A. W16B. Okay, and down at the bottom of page 77, we have E13. It's to keep us alert. Don't ask. All right, chapter 6, number 79, or page 79. Issue I-1.
Yes.
Yes. This is implementation. Issue I-2.
Yes. Oh. No, scratch that. Guess I'm good on that.
I-3.
Yes.
On to page 80. I-4.
Yes.
I-5.
Yes, although again, we may have covered it.
I-6. Top of page 81, I-7. I-8. I-9.
I had I-8, or one that's relevant to I-8.
Okay. I-9. I-10 on page 82. I-11. I-12. I-13. I-14.
Yes.
I-15. I-16. And I-17 on the bottom of 83. I-18A on 84. I-18B. I-18C. I-18D. I-18E. I-18F. I-18G. I-18G again. I-18H. On page 85, I-18, I think it's I-18J.
Oh, I've got I-18I.
You've got what?
18I.
I've got 18I.
Is there an I? Where'd I go? Here.
It's right under the chart.
There we go.
Right under the colored chart.
Got it.
Okay. I-18J. Did you want me to mark it for you? or-
18I, yes.
No, yes? Okay. I-18K, I-18L. And turning over to page 86, I-18M, I-18N, I-18O.
N.
N like in Nellie. M like in Mary, N like in Nellie, O like in orange. I-18P, I-18Q, I-18R, I-18S, and we are at the end of Memo 1. So, shall we go through Memo 2?
Memo 2.
It's the little one. It's this one that had the map on it. It says Hillside District Plan, Land Use Plan Map.
Madam Chair, I brought that map, but I didn't bring the attached memo, so are there any?
I don't know. It just here says there are a few cross-references not quite right that may cause confusion. And that the last sentence in the response at the top of the page, these look like they're attached is a land use plan map that reflects staff's response made in the issue response report. Modifications reflect issues raised, such as perhaps when we get to the map section, we can refer to this.
Okay. Maybe it's on our computers.
Does that make sense to you, Mr. Robinson?
Yes, I think if you're going to discuss the map, we can discuss the map, but disregard the first half of that page. The second half of the page, there are a few mostly technical edits that are changed. So there are two. Sounds like we need one copy to Commissioner Pease.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I didn't bring mine either. I have the map.
A point of order here is that this is information that, while it may be satisfactory, we're just now looking at it. I just had the opportunity of looking at it right now, and I really don't feel comfortable in taking action this evening on this item and some of the subsequent items as well, too. And I'll point out that we have so many items identified that's problematic if we're going to get through those this evening.
Well, what I'm about to recommend is that we might, I just want to look at this third memo a second and see what's in it, that we may want to decide how much we realistically think we can do this evening. And, for instance, if we don't think we're going to get to the road stuff this evening, I don't know that Mr. Wilbur needs to sit here all night in anticipation that we're going to get to roads and that we may not. So I just want to just stand down a minute and look at this. Although,
if I may, Madam Chair, on the third memo, if that's what you're looking at right now, those will come up. R1, I believe, was the one that goes through most of the roads. Those bullets occur at that point, so that would be the time when that would come up.
this is mostly road-related.
Yeah, there's a few. T11 was pulled by Mr. Phelps, so that's some language that he might be pleased with. And then there was one new T issue that we're going to make sure comes up. So I think we'll just bring it up, take a look at it, but I don't know that we need to pull these separately.
No, I agree. And from looking at it, I think that would, when we get to that section, it'll make sense dealing with it then. So I think at this time we might want to look at this and see what we might realistically think we can do this evening. I'm open for suggestions, fellow commissioners.
Madam Chairman, I'm not sure how quickly it's going to go, and it might be better to not make a determination now as to what we're going to conclude with, but like work for an hour and then determine how fast we go through the process and then and then come to a conclusion.
Okay.
It's just that I can
Just
see us.
reflecting on past experience.
Well, my past experience is that we go very slowly, but I can't determine exactly when we have an issue.
Well, I'm just looking at how many we have to go through, but some of them may go quickly.
Well, we have the staff here now.
Yeah.
And there might be a couple that will be inconvenienced, but it's a good learning opportunity for them.
Yes, Mr. Phelps.
Good.
I totally accept your wise counsel. Okay.
Madam Chair, I would suggest that we just go ahead
And
start on this first one dated August 31st,
Yeah.
set these others aside, and we may find that
A lot
some of the
of things.
questions may be answered on the 2 and the 3 as we work on the 1.
I agree, and especially, and even some of the ones that Ms. Pease and Mr. Weddleton submitted in their own memos with issues. Okay. So, we'll just start going through these. And I will get to the starting place here. All right. Are you ready, Madam Secretary? Okay. Ms. Pease, you have the floor for G1.
Yes, this may not necessitate any change in the plan text, but I wonder whether it might need to have an amendment in the Title 21 rewrite. I'm quite concerned about that indented paragraph that says in part, where conditions, standards, or requirements imposed by any provision of this title, meaning Title 21, are either more restrictive or less restrictive than any provision found in the comprehensive plan, the provision of this title shall govern. That's the language that's proposed for adoption. To me, that emasculates any of our step-down plans, our district plans, our local plans, our neighborhood plans. I thought were intended to be more specific than the area-wide comprehensive plan. So I guess there are two questions here. First, to back up a little bit, I thought we had heard previously that the area plan is an enforceable planning document, that it does carry it carries with it the power of enforcement. That's one question. And the second question is this really what we want, that if a neighborhood or a district goes through and comes up with conditions or standards or requirements, that every single bit of that has to result in a Title 21 code revision, even though it is pertinent only to that specific district. That seems to me to be an impossible task. It's easy to guess that a very large percentage of what's proposed in here will never get there, if for no other reason than the administrative and public time and money required to do so. So I'm uncomfortable with this interpretation that's proposed in Title 21, and I think it just basically neuters a lot of what would be passed here tonight, because it can't possibly all be codified.
Just a point of clarification. What are we referring to? You have a specific citation. What are you referring at?
On page 1 of the issue response, in the indented paragraph, which is about halfway down the page, there is, I guess it's a quote from the proposed rewrite of Title 21.
I don't see it.
And you see that, the indented portion of text? It says, the paragraph starts, is not indented. The paragraph starts, according to Title 21 rewrite, where conflicts exist between Title 21 and the comprehensive plan. And then it spells out what I believe is an excerpt from the Title 21 rewrite.
If I could jump in and start answering the response, Madam Chair. First of all, I think there's a lot in that page, two-page explanation, so it's sort of, you have to read the whole thing to understand the context. That particular statement is part of the provisionally adopted Chapter 1 of the Title 21 rewrite, so that's gone through both this body and the Assembly. It doesn't deal with the relationship of one district plan to another element of the comprehensive plan. It deals with a development standard. So, for example, what it's saying is if you come in for a building permit and you need to have setbacks, the setbacks, the specific development standards need to be in the zoning code to be utilized. If, for example, a neighborhood, to use your example of a neighborhood district, if you do a neighborhood plan and say South Edition really wanted to have 10-foot setbacks instead of what currently exists on the front of their property, that would be fine. That would be adopted. If that were to go through and become adopted, it would need to be codified to take effect, because what happens is you come in for a building permit, those specific standards govern. So that particular statement really has to do with the relationship of a development standard to an element, a general policy in a comprehensive plan. So when it comes to doing the stuff that you see in code, basically if a plan calls for a change in code, that code has to be changed for it to be effective. It's really quite simple. We can't establish zoning code in documents other than the code itself. However, we can and do and should establish the general intent within those documents. So, for example, there's a lot of places in the Hillside District Plan that would require follow-up in the zoning code, but not all of them. It really depends. It's not everything in this document has to do with development standards, but those that do require the code to be changed for that to be implemented.
If I may, Madam Chair, there's still a tremendous amount that would have to be adopted by code, but there is an area of concern here where there are strong intent statements given. And, for example, and would those intent statements be negated because there isn't anything specifically in Title 21 that's been adopted? And here's an example. On page 4-7 of the draft hillside plan, there is, this is under roads, and I think there's something similar under trails. There's a paragraph that says, third, comma, routes need not be constructed in the exact location as depicted on the map. The routes were drawn at a planning level in an attempt to avoid major impacts and other constructability and acceptable grades. But if the Title 21 says that routes must be delineated on the OSHP in order to be funded and built, that would be a conflict. And the same thing would exist with trails. Hillside Draft Plan is now going to have a statement that says, we've attempted to put trails in the best locations, but this doesn't cover every possible trail that will be needed, and there may be some more added. But if Title 21 says no trail shall be required to have an easement unless it's shown on the map, there's a conflict. And what I'm worried about is the way we've worded Title 21. All these good intentions, these promises, can be just discarded if there's any little conflict with Title 21.
Again, Commissioner Pease, we're talking about specific design and development standards. The language that you just quoted in the plan is the same language that's in Title 21 in the subdivision regulations that basically says, look at the area-wide trails plan, but know that the actual route will vary depending on site-specific planning. It's already in there. That's actually what the practice is. So the fact is, this is just explaining to the leader what happens. But at the same time, this is a very powerful and very important statement, because what it's basically saying is that the zoning code and the subdivision code provides specificity that are specific to plotting decisions and planning decisions that we make, and the plans provide overall direction. The overall direction is provided in the comprehensive plan by the implementation components of that the code controls, and that's always been the case, has been my understanding. That's correct. I guess that's clarification. I have always assumed that where there's specificity in the code, that overrides a requirement in the comprehensive plan.
That's correct, and to emphasize that, the paragraph that's quoted, that you referenced in the paragraph, doesn't change. This is the way that things have done and are done within our regulatory framework. There's no change implied by that particular language.
But if I may here, it's important to understand, too, is that when you're adopting a plan such as this, which is an add of the comprehensive plan, it is utilized in decisions. For example, the planning board, when it's making a determination on, for example, a road or a trail, will in the future use the hillside district plan as guidance. And so when there's guidance as provided by this plan, the planning board is going to be obliged to follow that. Now, that is distinguished from something inside the zoning code, the plotting requirements, that says something very specific. And so it's not correct to conclude that because of this statement, you emasculate the district plan or other plans of this type. This simply means that those implementation plans are utilized in decision-making, and they're used in decision-making in terms of how the decision is generally made, but in terms of the design details and the specific aspects, that's really controlled by the code, Title 21, both the general code sections as well as subdivision regulations.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison, you're next in the queue.
Bruce, I think you said that very well. When I went through the 2020 plan, one of the things that I discovered in the process as we did that, is that if anything was put into the 2020 plan and you went in at some time later to get a permit for a specific issue and Title 21 had not addressed that or had a certain code in there, but it was then changed in the 2020 plan, the 2020 plan then became the enforceable process. I want to say law, but I realize that's the wrong word. So is my understanding on this plan, once it goes through this commission, the Assembly then accepts it. Once they accept it, even though Title 21 has not been changed, doesn't that become the governing decision on the development or the issue as they come up?
Yes and no, and I think that's why that this is such a confusing issue. The plan once adopted, for example, on the land use plan map, will be part of the information considered if someone were to come to this body, for example, for a rezone and onto the Assembly. It is absolutely part of the comprehensive plan that should be considered. However, if we're talking about a code change, let's just take my little setback example. If there was a setback requirement on the hillside that wanted to extend all the front setbacks, that really would not take effect until the code itself was changed. So it really depends on the level of what we're talking about. And again, that's why it's a tough nut to crack.
But if I was developing something on my property, and I came forward, even though Title 21 had not been changed yet, but the spirit of this said that's where we're going, it's more than likely as a person requesting that I am going to have to comply to the newer request as opposed to the current Title 21. Isn't that correct?
Again, it would depend on what you were coming forward with. It really would. So, for example, there are steep slope provisions that are in this plan. If you had a lot that was a steep slope lot, and there's general intent in this document that you establish a site disturbance envelope and be limited in terms of what you can disturb on your site. This plan, and just let's forget the fact that issue's already gone through the Title 21 rewrite. Let's pretend it didn't go there first. This plan puts that out there as a policy intent, that code will be written to guide you in your development process. But we're talking about a level of detail and specificity that can really only be described and put forth in code. You're not going to sit there and negotiate at a building at the front counter and someone's going to say, well, this kind of says you can disturb 15,000 up to 20,000, but maybe over here you have a little more. Again, what this plan is laying out is the sort of the policy framework, and then we would bring a code change back to you as this body before it gets codified, and we would judge whether it was consistent with the intent of the Hillside District Plan, and we would add, specific detail to that effect. And if I could just add one more point, Commissioner Pease mentioned that there was a whole lot of this plan that needs to go through and be changed through Title 21. I think it would be a good exercise for us to go through and actually spell those out and understand what those are. I don't think there are as many as you think there are. There are some specific code changes that this plan proposes, but there are just as many changes that are proposed to be made to policy or other areas of sort of the municipal regulatory process, where we've tried to lay that out with a policy number so we can be specific on what policy we're talking about and an implementation step on how the heck we get there at the end of the day. But it really is it depends on each issue we're going to talk about.
Okay. Mr. Isham, did you have a question?
Yes, I have concerns about that same paragraph that Ms. Pease discussed, especially where they say if it's less restrictive. Typically, as your plans get more detailed, you're allowed to be more restrictive, but you can't override the general plan. So if you're going to say something like this, I'd take out the reference to less restrictive, but they can sure be more restrictive. I mean, that's the way the federal government works. It makes the big picture, and then if the state wants to be more restrictive, they can. If this city wants to be more restrictive, they can. But typically you can't go the other way.
But isn't it also true that we're not dealing with this particular section of Title 21 at this point? I thought it was dealt with previously.
That's correct. This is part of the provisionally adopted section of Chapter 1 of the Title 21 rewrite.
Okay, Mr. Weddleton, did you have a question?
No. Thank you.
No, okay.
Madam Chair, to close this issue?
Yes, Mr. Phelps, did you have another question?
I have a general question on page 3, yeah.
Okay, still related to issue G1?
Okay, I'll withdraw it then.
Okay. All right.
Are we done with this then, or?
No, we're not done. Ms. Pease has the floor.
Yes, to wrap up my concerns about this issue, I guess I would like to ask staff to check and see if there is a conflict in the rewritten section of Title 21 with regard to trail easements, because my memory is that there is part of an ordinance in there that says trail easements can be requested or required only if on part of an adopted trails plan. And that would overrule the intent in here that some new trail easements may be discovered through the process of, or realigned through the process of subdivision. And we've seen this in recent cases, that Creekview Estates, there was a reluctance on the part of staff to adopt the offered trail along a creek because, for a time anyway, because there was a trail shown on a nearby road parallel. So that would be a particular follow-up that would give a little measure of relief. And then the other sort of concrete action arising from this concern, glad to hear that you would consider sort of a summary table of the actions, and kind of have that in Appendix B. But I was hopeful that there could be a little more specificity given to that timeline, particularly with the near-term recommendations. And it would be great to have an estimate of cost and staff availability and a timeline. That may not be possible or practical. At the very least, though, I think it would be good for the public to know about the timeline and the cost and the commitment to goals 2A, 2B, and 2C, which are the development of construction standards. I say that because the plan's gone on for quite a long while, and then we think that could be done before the next construction season. And then I have a couple other implementation actions, but those are best dealt with under parks. So those, I guess, are a couple of, it's really 3 specific requests: checking Title 21 on that trails issue, providing more specificity than the near term. So, for example, 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 would be good for the public to know. And then can goal 2A, 2B, 2C be done in the very near time frame before the next construction season?
Perhaps, Madam Chair, I can just speak to this. Appendix B has, to the best of our ability, a very basic timeline. It describes near term as 1 to 3 years, and I think that's generalities is about all we can get to at this point, not knowing what next year's budget really, and we don't have a budget for next year. Until we can do that, we really can't totally plan our work program. But that's the reality. Is in a district plan, we're not going to get down to the finite issues. If you all as a body would like to recommend that you change the sort of column there on particular issues, then you should go forward with that and make those motions to make that change. But our response is that, in general terms, we've tried to make it known how we're going to go about putting basically an action plan together once this document's adopted.
Thank you. Mr. Phelps.
I guess a question and also an observation. when I'm looking at this, and we're talking about this paragraph that we've been discussing for some time now, it says, and going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 line down, where it says provision found in the comprehensive plan. My interpretation of the comprehensive plan is that that's it's an encompassing statement, and by that what I mean is that when you say comprehensive plan, it means the comprehensive plan and all the functional elements of that have been adopted over time. That's an important clarification. Again, we're not dealing with this particular section of the code right now, but I think what this is pointing out, at least, I think it's pointing out to all of us at the table here, is that we need to know up front in the beginning of this plan the relationship of this plan to the code and to the comprehensive plan so that we can, or you can, properly apply that in the future. It's actually critical to be able to understand these relationships, because if you don't understand the relationships, you will have this conversation a lot. So.
Okay, Mr. Isham.
Yeah, I have a question on page 2, last paragraph, last 2 lines. It's in bold. They talk about the land use plan map and the hillside district plan will replace both the 82 map and the land use policy map in Anchorage 2020 for the hillside. And I can remember the pain we went through to get this composite land use map dated June 28, 2006. And that's basically all we have to work with right now, but it really doesn't count because the 82 is still what really counts. And so as I read this, what you're telling me is we're going to take a little chunk of the 82 map and a little chunk of this thing, and we're going to say it's the hillside district, and it replaces what we're dealing with now. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Commissioner Isham, yes. If you are faced with something that you would need to consult the land use plan map on, you would not wait for the land use plan map update, the whole bowl-wide update. You would actually have the section of land use plan as included in your district plan. So again, I think that speaks to some of what Ms. Page was talking about in terms of the function and importance of a district plan. It does have a lot of importance. Now, just to clarify, we have been working closely with our other staff that's involved in putting a land use plan map together. So that said, if there were differences that came out of the process here, the differences here are what has gone forward. And that's where you have some different land uses and some different labels, some different intensities.
Now, as a follow-up to that then, is the intention that we will eventually get a composite land use map in little sections by doing these various plans, or are we ever going to look at it as a whole?
Well, again, our process is to update the land use plan map. This body has made it clear, and staff has made it clear. I mean, that's a desire once Title 21 rewrite is done that we would go back and revisit the land use plan map and get it adopted once and for all. Then imagine it's adopted. If within 5-10 years we undertake another district plan, it would be completely appropriate for that particular district plan to once again update the land use in that particular area. So it's a fluid thing. It doesn't necessarily stay put for whatever, almost 30 years on this. But I think in the interest of folks on the hillside and other people in this community, every time we do a district plan, we made it a point to include in the scope of the project an update of the land use plan map.
Okay, I don't have any problems with that. I don't think I knew that.
Well, I have a problem with the fact it hasn't been done yet. Ms. Pease, I see you, but I'm going to acknowledge Mr. Phelps because I think he has something quick to say before we bring closure to this.
Yeah, I think that it's important to understand that I believe that staff is assuming the 1982 plan map will eventually go away. I certainly hope so. I think we're assuming that the 2020 plan map is what we're referring to. But it does kind of raise a question of logic that, in fact, that plan map has not been adopted, at least not not in a strict sense. And I would imagine that what is happening here is if we approve the plan map as associated with the hillside plan, that when the plan map that goes forward to adoption, meaning the plan map for the entire bill, it will reflect the land use map that you see now. It's not going to be another map, so to speak, because you have not had the whole plan map come forward yet. What's going to happen, or should happen, is that you're going to take out that section of the plan right now and then replace it with the plan map that we're going to adopt this evening. Anything less than that is going to be very confusing.
In other words, we're making a patchwork quilt.
Well, what I'm saying is that they still have to approve the plan map, or Ms. Paladin has to approve the plan map, and you might as well take the land use map that we're going to be approving in this plan and recognize that replaces the plan map in the comprehensive plan. And when we bring the comprehensive plan map forward, it shows this plan map. It's part of the overall plan. I'm using the right words here.
Yes.
But you don't want to have 2 or 3 maps.
That is the intent.
Okay, good.
It would be nice. Ms. Pease?
Yes.
What do you want to do with this one?
Well, I would like to ask Mr. Robinson to volunteer to check the code and answer the question on whether there is proposed provisionally adopted language that says trails must be on an adopted trails plan. Would that override the intent of this plan to have some flexibility if needs for new connections arise? That's one. And then I would like to follow up on his suggestion that this body could provide more specificity to the time frame for a couple of the implementation actions, and I will bring those up when we get to LU, let's see, looks like 13, 14, and 15. So I'll put that out for just a second.
Okay, so are you proposing then that this would be something that would come back to us?
No, I don't think coming back to G1. I think we can finish with G1, but I just wanted to say that there are a couple of suggestions that arose here that I will bring back up when we get to LU, whatever I said, 13, 14, 15, 16.
All right. Is there concurrence with those suggestions that have been put forward by Ms. Pease? Is everyone okay with it? Unless someone screams out. Okay, that's agreed to. I know we haven't made very big progress. We've only been through one item, but we're going to take a short break, and I bet we'll move a lot faster when we come back. Yes, I'm threatening everyone. Are we ready to go back to work?
Mm-hmm.
I thought so. Well, we're making great progress. We're now going to turn to page 3, and we're on item G2. Now, at the top of G2, Mr. Phelps.
No, it's G1. I still have an issue on G1.
Okay.
On page 3, though.
Yeah, at the top of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of my concern deals with the clarity of the plan, what the plan is intended to do, what it will do, and to have a discussion of that at the beginning of the plan so that everybody understands what can be done and cannot be done with the plan and the role of the plan in making those decisions. You've heard a conversation with the commission that's going on for, 30 minutes now, and we're supposed to know what we're doing, okay? And God help the public out there if we're having this conversation, you know? I hope this doesn't get reported, by the way. Probably won't. So I would strongly recommend that the beginning of the plan, that there be a succinct summary of what this plan is intended to do, what it's not intended to do, and the relationship of this plan to the comprehensive plan into Title 21 to sort these issues out so we don't have to do it each and every time. And I know from a staff perspective that it seems as self-evident, but it is not self-evident. I can guarantee you it's something you have to work through is the best way of describing it. So with that as a preface, and so it's a strong recommendation on my part. I'll carry as it, if possible, I'd like to carry as a commission recommendation as well, too, that we have some description of the overall intent of the plan in relationship to the plan to other aspects of the comprehensive plan in Title 21. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is on the policy. And we're talking about the policy on the top of page 3. And you're indicating that some policies are going to continue and these will be the comprehensive plan and some are not going to continue. What I would like to have, not now, but when we come back to this, because we're not going to finish it this evening, is a listing of which policies go away and which ones remain. So when the people that deal with this in the future and have to deal with the relationship of the comprehensive plan, they know that policies X, Y, and Z from the Hillside Plan apply, and correspondingly policies A, B, and C, and D of the comprehensive plan, the 2020 plan, do not apply. So when you go through a planning board issue or a planning commission issue, you will apply the right policies. My fear is if we don't state this now, we're going to deal with this issue and the confusion associated with it for a long time in the future. This is going to be an important plan. You're going to have lots of development issues out in the hillside, and you need to get clarity now, not later. And so I would request, Madam Chairman, that when this comes back to us next week or whenever it is, that there be provided to us a listing of applicable policies of this plan and as it relates to the comprehensive plan, so we know what policies we're adopting, what policies we're not adopting.
Ms. Pease.
Well, I agree with the first part of Mr. Phelps's request in that it would be helpful to people who are going to pick up this plan to have it stated in here that this map supersedes the area-wide trails plan, that this road map supersedes a map in the LRTP, but that this certain sections must be adopted by code. That's I think, helpful. But the idea that this also lists Comp 2020 plans, which are now superseded, is a little problematic. The only one I can think of that's very, very clear is the elimination, the closure to the idea of the rural-urban boundary, i.e. we're not going to have one. Right. But what about a policy such as retain mature vegetation wherever possible? Well, this plan so far hasn't required retaining mature vegetation except in the future on the steep lots and the high elevation lots. So does that mean that we can assume that we can cancel that because it was in the comp plan and not brought forth in this plan? That's a danger if we're going to call out cancellations of
I think you identified the issue I'm talking about. You raised the issue of which policy applies, and frankly, I don't have an opinion as to which one applies. I just want to know which one does apply. That's what I want to know. It says right here, if policies conflict, the HDP should indicate the policy. So staff is presuming that policies conflict. I want to know what conflicting policies exist. Right now, I don't know that.
Okay. If staff has identified which HDP policy...
Well, apparently that's the case because otherwise they wouldn't have written the way they did.
Okay. All right. I wouldn't like to see an assumption or a negation or a whole lot of Comp 2020 policies just because...
That's not where I'm going with this. I'm going for the issue of clarity and elimination of confusion in future adjudicatory actions. Okay. That's the intent.
Then if you're saying where staff already feels there's a conflict between the Hillside District Plan and the prior 2020 plan, let's be clear on that.
Right. Which policies apply? So we go through an action in the future, the planning board goes through an action in the future. We know these policies apply and these policies don't apply. I'm asking for clarity here for future decision-making. And I don't have any idea about which policies conflict or not.
Could be a tall order, but if staff
No, they should not.
knows what they have worries about, then I guess.
That's not difficult. They can go ahead and do that in a week. They're very familiar with it.
In all their spare time. Is there any objection to including a statement to that effect so that people will know what policies do apply and what don't?
Madam Chairman, I'm asking for a clarification of the overall relationship of the comprehensive plan, the Title 21, and other components of the comprehensive plan. That's what I'm asking for in terms of actual agreement from the Commission. In terms of the result of the identification of policy conflicts, I don't know that yet. All I'm asking for at this point is not a motion from the Commission. I'm simply asking for staff to do the analysis to determine the conflict.
Okay. Mr. Robinson?
I think we'll do our best. I don't think it'll be as clear, and just here's why, is that the Hillside District Plan is both an element of the comprehensive plan, as is Anchorage 2020. It's also an implementation step of Anchorage 2020. And so you get into some sort of confusing scenarios that I probably best explain by writing it out for you. So we'll put that together to the best of our ability.
My point is that if it's confusing now, it's not going to be less confusing in the future.
And just, if I may, Madam Chair, just one, I don't know of any issues that really conflict. I mean, really what this plan should do is it should take direction from Anchorage 2020 in the policy recommendations and in what it's looking at. There's one issue that everybody knows about that has to do with commercial on the hillside, and the policy map says, with a little asterisk down below, the Hillside District Plan should determine if commercial uses are appropriate on the hillside. So in that sense, this plan looked at it, decided it was not appropriate, and moved on. So, that would be an issue where it kind of looked at an issue and responded to it. It's not exactly a conflict, but I don't expect us to have a lot of conflict, but we'll have a lot of different answers in this little table.
Well, I think if we're having problems identifying where there may be conflicts, potential conflicts or not, and what those might be, I think I can't imagine how much harder it would be for the public to try to interpret it. So any clarity we can provide, I think it may be important.
Will do, but just for the record, I don't think there are conflicts. Otherwise, we would have been explicit about them. That one example of commercial is as close as it gets to sort of a conflict. So we're not going to come back with a document that's going to show you a lot of conflicts. But we'll come back with a document that lays out the 2020 policies and indicates how the Hillside District Plan either deals with it one way or the other and whether it still holds validity moving forward.
Okay. Ms. Pease, I have you in the queue for some reason. Is it an accident?
Not on this issue.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything on G2, so we'll move ahead. And I don't have anything on G3 or G4, G5 or 5A, or 5B or 5C or D. Ms. Pease, you had something on 5E at the bottom of
And I'm going to
page
skip
6.
that one.
You're going to skip it?
Move on ahead.
Oh, music to my ears. All right, G6 at the top of page 7. I have Mr. Isham and Ms. Pease. Mr. Isham, you can go first.
No, I didn't pull that one.
Oh, well, I've got your initials by it. Ms. Pease.
Yes. This refers to, in our draft plan, page 1-13, and it is supposed to be an illustrative figure I found it confusing and misleading, and would like to suggest that either it be taken out or changed so that it really does reflect the hillside character. A couple of problems I have with it. This map of neighborhood-based growth is not what was eventually adopted in the conceptual map of the 2020 plan. It says that this is a blend. So to show one map and not the other is confusing. Second, we are not now using, with regard to the photos, we are not now using the terms lower hillside, central hillside, and upper hillside. And so if we're going to show people visually what the hillside neighborhoods look like, what I would propose to do is put in a map of the hillside with leaders of actual photos showing where they are on that map, and have them illustrate the land use map categories of limited intensity, low intensity, 1 to 3 dwelling units, the second low intensity, 3 to 5, and the medium intensity, and Furrow Creek. And then if we need one for Chugach State Park, that's fine too. But there's not really any connection between those photos and the map that's put in here, and the map that's put in here doesn't have any connection to 2020, what was adopted in 2020. So I'd like to have those changes made.
If I may, I don't think, I disagree that there's no connection. Often when you start out with a planning process, you take the information that you have in front of you, you take general planning concepts, those can be transects in a variety of densities, and you try to illustrate those concepts in a planning document and then ultimately get to recommendations. The fact that we don't tie exactly the recommendations at this point, I think, is your point. I agree with it. Our general response is going to be, we want this document to be accurate, we want it to be clear, we want it to be helpful. If this document is doing none, we would rather take the images out of the document, in this case, than spend a lot of time matching recommendations with pictures and so on and so forth. With the amount of time that it would take to make it perfect along those lines, just it's not worth it to us given that it doesn't change the actual policy recommendation.
I guess that would be preferable to me, since there's nothing going to be left in the plan that shows lower hillside, central hillside, upper hillside, and a couple of these photos I think are not really representative, so I'm okay with taking it out.
Okay, is the rest of the commission okay with taking out those photos? Is there any objection?
And the map, the whole.
And the map?
Well, I'd had an earlier comment on this too, and I accepted staff's response. It does look like these pictures could go away, but having this map, I think, is good with the wording that staff suggests. If both of the two scenarios that were blended could be in here, maybe they'd fit now without these photos, that would be better. But I think we'd lose something without this map showing the overall city, and it does show, where there's greater density is not on the hillside, there's less on the hillside. The bigger scheme of the layout of the city is shown very well in this map. And as long as there's some text saying that, this isn't exactly it was a blended scenario, it kind of matches what's in the comprehensive plan. It's the same kind of wording. So I'd like to leave the neighborhood growth scenario map in there and possibly add the other one.
That would, I think, be clear. And then if both are in there, if what we have adopted is a blend of both and put both in there, that would be okay with me. And
just remove the photos?
Well, it's too. I would have thought that they have enough photos in their stock to go ahead and put in photos and little leaders. But I don't know. I'm not the graphic person on the plan, so I'd like to leave that option open. But if they say no, we're not going to spend the time, then I'd say take these out because these are confusing.
I'd rather they spend the time writing some new Title 21 code.
Okay.
Okay. So, what are we proposing now?
I'm okay with Commissioner Weddleton's suggestion that we take the, it sounds as if we take these photos out if they can't fix them, and explain the Hillside District in context with this neighborhood-based growth scenario map and the urban transition scenario, and the explanation that a blend of these maps was used to create the overarching Comp 2020 plan.
Is that doable, Mr. Robinson?
I don't know. It depends on, what all changes, and I would prioritize it as pretty low down. It's just communicating general intent, but if that's your desire, you should make that known as a recommendation.
Okay. Mr. Morrison?
I just want to make a comment.
Is your microphone
Sorry
on?
about that. I just want to make a comment as a newcomer to this deal. This initial map, when I looked at it, I found very informative. The pictures to me really didn't mean a lot. I go for more what's in the content and what's here. But a reference to the map that is on page 2/9, where it gets more specific for what's actually in the hillside, might be helpful. But the map here I thought was very, very good.
Okay. Is there any objection to what Mr. Weddleton had proposed? I don't hear any objection. Mr. Weddleton, did you have something else to say?
Oh, no, that's it, thank you.
Or Ms. Pease, did you have something else to say about it?
No.
Okay. Then we can move on to the next one I have is under land use on page 9, LU1, Ms. Pease.
My concern here is that the comprehensive plan said that the Hillside District Plan should give specific direction to the Heritage Land Bank with regard to the parcels in the hillside. And it sounds as if the intent is to adopt all the Hillside Land Bank's decisions. I still think we need to show those parcels on the land use plan map. And that was done in the draft. They were labeled. And they weren't labeled on the current proposed map. I guess I say they were labeled in the draft. They do have HLB parcel numbers, so for those of us who know, we can find the HLB parcels. But I would like to request that the HLB parcels be labeled on the land use plan map unless they're labeled somewhere else in the plan.
Okay. Mr. Phelps?
I have a question on page 10, the recommendation. It says a map is shown that identifies LB parcels. The next sentence says the land use plan map will be used to provide guidance for HLB land. So that raised the question to me of exactly what guidance does it provide? Is there a different standing for HLB land than for any other land? Do they follow a different section of code, or do they follow the normal code, so to speak, so that the land use plan map is affecting their parcels? Where I'm going with this is that I don't think that it needs to be as appropriate for a special set of requirements on HLB land. They should be subject to the same requirements as everybody else. And that's really what our recommendation is. The only reason that recommendation is that it's specific to the issue posed. Our proposal is not to include that map as a land use plan map. That would be singling out a particular owner, whether it's a HLB or any other owner. The plan is the land use plan map establishes the land uses for all owners, so I would agree with that. We put this in here to just demonstrate or show where HLB parcels are, and really what's going on here is that
separate land use studies are really advising, site-specific land use studies for the most part are advising the land use designation of the HLB land and not this process on that. And I think if there was a change, we would have made that change, and there are some in terms of trails, but that's sort of why we've gone through the explanation and related it back to the Potter Valley land use study.
Actually, that kind of does raise an issue. You said that, well, it sounds as if there's a process that is used by the Heritage Land Bank to make a determination as to the best use of its land. I kind of remember something like this going on in the Eagle River area. So is there a code section that relates to a requirement for a study of HLB parcels or properties before they're actually used or disposed of?
Commissioner Phelps, there is in the HLB portion of the code title, I don't recall title, but it does talk about, what it says is if there is no land use designation in the land use plan map, you shall conduct a site-specific land use study.
Okay, so if we do have a land use designation, that requirement does not kick in.
Right. Except that it's been done already anyway, but you're right. If there's another property, HLB parcel, not all of them were subject to the Potter Valley land use study. It would not be required to go through a further. It would be required to go through a disposal process, right, per the code, but not a separate land use analysis.
Okay. So, in fact, that requirement for a separate land use analysis is avoided as a result of the adoption of this land use map.
This land use map is consistent with the land use analysis, and the land use analysis provides a lot more specificity than can be provided in a generalized land use plan. So that specific plan will advise HLB in their disposal process. So, for example, there's parcels or tracts where actually in the land use study call for portions of those tracts to be retained for roads or right-of-way or whatever, a level of detail that we can't demonstrate on a land use plan map.
So when there's a disposal process, and of course there will be disposal processes on HLB parcels, they go through an analysis to determine the appropriateness of the land uses for disposal purposes that constitute the overall larger parcel. And that's what actually makes the determination of the disposal. So the land use plan map in this land use plan is in many respects, from the HLB perspective, a starting point for the disposal analysis. Is that correct? I think that's the answer.
But it wasn't in this case, is what I'm telling you. It preceded, the land use analysis preceded this land use plan map. They probably used the 82 map as a basis. We'll go with that.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Mr. Isham.
I just question whether you want to show the Heritage Land Bank parcels simply because if they do get sold or transferred, then the map becomes outdated as soon as that happens. And as long as you have a policy on how the land is supposed to be treated, the land bank knows where it is and they have to follow the rules. I question whether you need to identify the parcels.
Okay. Ms. Pease?
I guess my concern is just, and I know I want to move along on this one too, the comp plan said to give direction to the HLB parcels. And without any, still don't see any specific language in the plan that says, for example, that Hillside District Plan accepts the land use analysis and recommendations of the Potter Valley land use analysis, that sort of thing.
Maybe I could just point out one thing, and that is that the land use plan map itself reflects what is in the Potter Valley land use analysis. In other words, if you look at the plan map, just for instance, down at just to the east of, well, it'd be just south of where you see Potter Heights Drive down at the bottom, you see what is actually a little green park area and then residential and another little green strip. What that is, that's parcel 2-144, and what the land use plan, Potter Valley land use plan analysis recommendation was that there would be a park and then an open space, and the remainder of the tract would be shown as R10 residential type of development. This plan map actually does recommend that without really spelling out and outlining that as being a HLB parcel.
Okay, I see that now. I'm looking at the two maps side by side. I have no further comments on this issue, and I'm okay with it.
You're okay with it. So we don't need to do anything. We don't need to do anything more on your issues, Bruce?
Well, I'm not entirely satisfied with the answer that I got. I'm still kind of puzzling through what the relationship is between the land use plan map and the HLB decisions. I think in a disposal decision, the HLB goes through a disposal process and makes a determination at a site-specific level as to how they're going to dispose of land and for what purpose. And I don't think that's controlled by the land use plan map. I think the land use plan map is a starting point for a disposal process, but I couldn't get clarity in the answer, so I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe I could respond to that. Maybe that same parcel 2-144, which is on the land use, which is in the Potter Valley land use plan analysis. Just as an example, I believe it's just about a year ago, they did go out to bid on that parcel, and the planning department actually gets the opportunity to address these bids before they go to the assembly. Our comments is that we went to the Potter Valley land use analysis and just stated the fact that there was a park and a open space proposed within that tract, and that's reflected in that bid that went to the assembly. So they do look at that when they go to the assembly. They look at plans that are adopted in relation to the property.
All right, the next one I have is on page 13. It's LU5, and I think Ms. Pease had a question or an issue about that one.
I think LU1, but on page 9 came before that.
That's taken care of.
Yeah, we got that. Sorry, that's what we just did.
Okay, so LU5 is okay?
Yep. No. This is the issue of, this is a big sort of policy issue, the issue of phasing infrastructure so that you don't create a lot of unfunded impacts, especially when you have the, what shall I say, ARDSA, or, you know what, we can cover this in, under issue, I think we can cover it under one of the other issues, so I guess go ahead.
Okay, the next one, Mr. Weddleton, LU6.
Well, LU6, there's a number of other issues that tie into this, but just overall, this is really a huge issue. Mr. Westberg, sound check. Can you hear me okay? Okay. This is a huge issue for the hillside. Do we put density down there? And over the course of this plan, the area that was proposed for higher density and the increase in density possible has been whittled down slowly. And in this current response to further public comments on it, it's been moved down a little bit tighter. And I believe it's closer and closer to the originally stated rationale that, you know, there's some parts of this area that have soils that are not adequate for standard well and septic. It's near several main roads and near services. So it meets a general guideline from the comprehensive plan that the hillside district plan should look at having some higher density down in this part of the district. So I have grappled with this a huge amount. I've been through this area, and I would not be unhappy to totally ignore it, but I'm not really prepared to do that either. So, assuming everybody's read this, and I handed out a sheet that outlines my views on this. I'm willing to accept the changes proposed by staff on pages 13 through 15 with a few changes. The first is that planned unit developments that are currently allowed in Title 21 on 5-acre tracts will not be allowed in this district. Second, that the land use plan map will reflect a density of limited intensity 0 to 1 dwelling units per acre, with hash marks showing the overlay district, instead of the 3 to 5 DOA that's recommended in their most recent proposal in this issue response. I would also recommend that the change in the water utilities maximum perimeter of public sewerage not change until after the overlay district with design standards have been developed with the hillside community and after it's approved by the assembly. And a fourth condition would be that if a PUD or conservation subdivision using public water and sewer is planned, that property owners outside of that development would not be added to the assessment district for the water or sewer without their consent. And fifth, that neighborhood water and wastewater systems will be allowed in this Furrow Creek overlay district. And if you look at my handout, I have a few comments that support these points. Should I go through those? Or do you want to read them? Okay, first, the current PUDs can be on 5 acres at, I believe, 2 DOA. Is that correct? Currently, PUDs in R6 can be on 5 acres at 2 DOA, roughly. And so allowing that would subvert the intent of this overlay district. So I want to make sure those are not allowed. Leaving the land use plan maps at DUA, that's dwelling units per acre. New. I don't know, maybe you know. Okay, it was new to me when I showed up here. Leaving that at 0 to 1 would prevent confusion that smaller lot developments can have the higher DUA and will prevent increased tax assessments on lots that are not part of these PUDs or conservation subdivisions. And that was a important point brought out in public testimony. Leaving the land use plan map showing the density of 0 to 1 DOA will not prevent the Furrow Creek PUD or conservation subdivisions from happening. So the intent of the plan, as proposed by staff here, would not be changed. If looking at the implementation section of this plan, as soon as this plan is approved, that would imply a change in the AWW sewerage boundary, be simultaneous with adoption of this plan. So that would allow developments using public utilities before the overlay district is completed, and that would be unacceptable.
Yeah.
There's also a huge fear on the hillside. It's a major issue that if public water is moved into an area, that people who don't need it and don't want it would be forced to pay assessments or to hook up. And I see Mr. Joko is probably here, can explain how that could work, but or correct me if I'm wrong. How about if I explain it and you jump up here if I'm wrong? But you could have somebody who might have 5 lots to develop. He wants to do it on public sewer and water, but he wants to split it with 4 other lots who maybe don't need or want it. He can draw them into his assessment district, and then they vote. Well, he's got 5 out of 9 lots, so he wins. Now, these 4 lots who don't want it or don't need it could have this assessment imposed on them, okay? This is a rock-solid, legitimate fear for people on the fringe of public water and sewer. So my proposal here is that there'll be wording in this plan where that cannot happen. If someone wants to do one of these Furrow Creek conservation subdivisions with public water and sewer, that they are the assessment district. It would coincide with the boundaries of their conservation subdivision. Then there's the option of leaving neighborhood systems, allowing neighborhood systems in this area. The water utility gave us a statement that they are adverse to that and don't want any overlap between their service area and neighborhood systems. And I'm not convinced of their argument. The status on the Hillside Wastewater Management Plan for 27 years has recommended for most of the hillside that any new development have neighborhood systems. It's overlapped the water utilities lines for all those years. My understanding is that the Hillside Wastewater Management Plan came primarily from the water utility, and it hasn't been a problem. So I'd like to allow in this area neighborhood systems in conjunction with public water and utilities if developers choose that. And given these changes, I would support the changes proposed by staff along with these modifications.
Ms. Pease.
I have two questions. With your condition number 5, neighborhood water and wastewater systems will be allowed, what density would go along with that? Is there a concern that neighborhood systems don't work well if you allow the maximum density proposed in Floral Creek Overlay District?
I haven't done the math. I mean, you have to, certainly that could be a constraint. We did see in that case in Eagle River where they had taken a 15-acre, I forget how big that parcel was, but they'd gotten in a neighborhood system. But that would be a constraint. But there will be rules, and there are rules for neighborhood systems outlined in the plan.
Okay. And then the other question I had was, your first modification says no PUDs. Your fourth modification says if a PUD/conservation subdivision. So did you mean just to say if a conservation subdivision?
Not exactly, because the PUDs, I don't know that conservation subdivisions exist in current Title 21, but the PUDs of 5 acres are. And I'm not an expert on that. Staff could sure enlighten me.
A PUD is currently permitted in the R6 zoning district, which this area is zoned.
Right.
But aren't you saying that if this overlay district is drawn, you don't want PUD? You want the conservation subdivision standards so that they have to have the 50-foot buffer and so on?
Correct. I would want it as envisioned by this plan as opposed to what's currently. Because right now, someone could go in there and do a 5-acre PUD at a higher density. That's been the rule for many years now.
Okay.
But that would be quite a lot smaller area than is now recommended for this plan. So the PUDs in number 1 are the currently existing PUDs. The PUD/conservation subdivision refers to what's proposed in the Hillside District.
I see.
Okay, Mr. Phelps.
Just a couple of questions of clarification. So you would void out PUDs in this area, but you would permit conservation subdivisions. Is that what I'm getting?
Right. Maybe I should. In number 4, maybe I shouldn't have put the PUD because that's not the phrasing we're using in the Hillside District Plan. We're talking. I believe the phrasing is conservation subdivision for the Floral Creek area.
Yeah, there's some specific proposals that say that if development were to occur at a higher density, you would have to aggregate a certain amount of land. 12 acres, I think, is our recent proposal. And within those 12 acres, you could do a conservation subdivision, or you'd be required essentially to do a conservation subdivision if you are to achieve that density. So in other words, you have to incorporate open space in your design to get the 3D array that would be permitted under the overlay. It would be it would be an overlay district that would sort of allow you to do this particular conservation subdivision.
And I believe I confused things by on point 4 putting PUD. Scratch that out. Just leave conservation subdivision.
I guess I'm completely confused. Okay. What I'm getting from this is that you want to have an overlay district here?
The proposal in the plan is to allow development to occur at a higher density, but only in a certain way. And the way in which the plan proposes to sort of direct or guide that development is through the creation of an overlay district, which would essentially make specific that in this area, in order to do anything over the 1 DUA that you could do now, you'd have to do a variety of things, those things spelled out in general form in the plan. And so when we say what's been a little bit confusing in the plan in general is that there's a conservation subdivision that's now part of the Title 21 rewrite. There's a conservation subdivision tool that's been proposed for the hillside area that would have a density bonus associated with it. So it would sort of amend Title 21, direct Title 21, if you will, to add this other tool. And then a third area specific to the Furrow Creek area. And the intent is to then extend the sewer boundary out and place this overlay district on. And then the development would only occur if it sort of met those conditions and someone could assemble the parcels and make it happen financially and all that other stuff. But it is specific to this particular area, and I think what Brett Joker is going to discuss from AU's standpoint is both the specific recommendation in Commissioner Weddleton's proposal, but also I think it comes up as a separate issue, just in general, the notion of not permitting neighborhood systems within the AU sewer boundary.
Okay.
Lots of issues within this one issue, I guess.
Yes, there are. Okay, so does staff concur with voting out the use of the PUD in this instance? You agree that we should not use PUDs in this area? We only use conservation subdivisions that are designed for the hillside?
I think that, yes, you could essentially achieve.
You're going to have to go out and void that section of the code altogether.
I think because you would be allowed to achieve a slightly higher density within the conservation subdivision overlay district, it would be a moot point. The only difference, I'm not sure about the specific standards, but the main difference would be some commercial portion that's permitted in a PUD, which would not be appropriate here anyway.
Yeah, agreed. But I don't see that the difference necessarily between a PUD and a cluster subdivision. Perhaps I'm missing something.
Page 16 lays out some of the specifics, but it's not so unlike a PUD development. I mean, there's a few standards that are specific to open space.
Right. And it would seem that if you could do a PUD, but yet meet the same standards of the conservation subdivision, you could still do a PUD and still be conceptually correct.
Yeah, I guess I don't see the threat of still allowing a PUD, unless the threat is what Commissioner Weldon may be saying is if in the process of rezoning to a potentially higher density district and then slapping a PUD on top of that, you achieve a higher density than what's intended here. I see that.
But that's not what's intended. Okay. What I'm getting from this is that staff is changing its recommendation from a 3 to 6 DUA to a 0 to 1 DUA. But that's not correct?
The staff recommendation, and I think this alleviates Commissioner Weddleton's number 2 issue, is on the new land use plan map that you were given. It says 1 to 3 with a series of hash marks. Those hash marks indicate that something different is going on here than in the rest of the 1 to 3. It implies an overlay district. And 3 is the cap of the density that would be allowed on the chart in your issue response, page 16, I believe. And it's just making the color, if you will, consistent, but calling this area out as an overlay district. And the details in the overlay district would get at what Commissioner Weddleton is trying to prevent, which is a smaller lot would not be able to just simply divide into, to achieve the same density, but not the intent of the overlay district.
So, if I'm getting this correctly, is that you're talking about a 1 to 3 DUA in this area. You're talking about the use of a cluster, conservation subdivision in this area. My sense is that staff would still support a PUD if the same design concepts of the conservation subdivision were appropriate. Now, what about this perimeter of sewage? I'm looking at this map right here, and the maximum perimeter of sewage encompasses this area. Is it the intention to keep this map or to change the map? I'm confused about that aspect as well, too.
I think the best way, you're looking at a map on page 15?
I'm looking at map 5-7 you provided us this evening.
Oh, okay. The black dotted line and dark green in that area are currently inside the maximum sewer boundary, maximum perimeter of public sewerage.
What's the light green?
The light green is what the Hillside District Plan is recommending for inclusion or extension of that boundary.
Okay, so the Hillside District Plan continues to recommend the extension of the perimeter of the public sewage.
Yes.
Okay, you haven't changed that recommendation.
We've changed the northern border.
Okay, but you haven't changed the remainder. So the staff is still recommending the maximum perimeter generally as shown here.
Yes.
Okay.
They would go, in our opinion, they would go hand in hand.
Does that mean that when you say hand in hand, you mean, okay. So you would prefer that the perimeter of maximum sewage be adopted now, but you would assume that an overlay district would be prepared, and to resolve the overlay district would be to have an overlay district inside the same areas as showing map of maximum sewage, as opposed to doing it concurrently with the overlay district.
Yes. Now, Commissioner Weddleton has raised the concern that we would want to make sure we would not run into the situation where the boundary would be extended, but the overlay district would be delayed, and in the process someone would come in for, in effect, a rezone, but we would hope that the intent of the plan would be clear to not allow a rezone in the interim until that overlay district is in effect. I think it's a timing issue that we're talking about.
But it seems that the whole concept of an overlay district, it presumes that an overlay district would be prepared and has certain characteristics to it, but it seemed to be premature to change the maximum perimeter until the overlay district went through.
Correct. That's the point I was making.
Okay. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a couple more people in the queue. Ms. Pease.
I agree with Mr. Weddleton on not changing the sewage until the overlay district is put in place, because Mr. Robinson was implying that there's going to be that applicability of a plan when it hasn't been adopted by code yet. And we heard earlier that that's not going to happen. You can't apply this plan to somebody's property if there's not code to back it up. So.
But it's R6 right now.
Right, so it would need to stay R6 until there is some development standards that make the higher density palatable and provide the content.
I guess my point is you would have to see a rezone to be able to realize the fear that I think has been presented to you. And since it goes before this body, you in one way would be to simply say we wouldn't approve a rezone in this area until there's an overlay district in place. But there are other means to sort of protect the area.
Yeah, I'm not sure we have the authority. But anyhow, the other thing is, with the PUDs, I think I understand that if we allow PUDs, there can be a density increase that doesn't have the benefits of the conservation subdivision. We're trying to get some development standards in place that address the conditions, then we want those development standards to apply, not the general standards of the PUD. So I think that's important, not to have the PUD option. And I have one other question for staff. Staff recommends, it's on page 15 of our Hillside District Plan, recommends, let's see, it's just below that table, there's a bulleted item that says amend setback and stream standards as well as vegetative and stream buffers to a 50-foot minimum. Are those setbacks along lot lines?
I think the implication is that it would be a setback from the perimeter of the development.
Okay. Could we, if we pass this, can we specify that that's what it is along the perimeter of the development? Perimeter setbacks, so say amend perimeter setbacks?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Weddleton.
Okay, I'd just like to relay the point from Mr. Phelps. The existing PUDs can be on 5 acres with minimal design standards compared to what's recommended here, which would be a minimum of 8 acres with fairly high design standards. And that's kind of the main reason I want to clearly not allow the currently allowed PUDs. But in addition, if the water AWW's line were moved, someone could come in, if we don't make that change, with a 5-acre PUD on public water without these design standards. So, but I guess we're in agreement on that the overlay should be in place before the sewage line is moved.
Well, I think that the development of an overlay district is not necessarily going to be a simple or fast process. And I think you should also recognize that a PUD, I believe, is not a by right use, it's a conditional use. Okay? If you say in the comprehensive plan you're not going to have any conditional use approved in this area unless it meets the following standards, that's the slam dunk. You don't have to change the code. You just basically specify that inside the comprehensive plan. So along those lines, you probably want to think about, wording to that effect as well, too. But what concerns me, I suppose, as well is that we're presuming that all this stuff is going to occur. And I guess I'm less sanguine on that. I think that some may occur and some may not. And it seems to me that what you're talking about is an area where you want to have control over development inside a specific area. I don't think you want to expand the perimeter of that sewage until you figure this thing out. And that as rezonings occur in this area, conditional uses would not be acceptable. Rezonings could be considered, assuming that the aspects of the conservation subdivision design as currently proposed, or whatever the words will be, are met. Because I think you're going to be confronted with a situation of people coming in before you have the conservation subdivision district in place, and then you've got a problem. So I think you need to specify your performance standards in terms of what you want to achieve inside this area now, as opposed to relying upon a lot of things happening in the future.
I think I agree with that. We're not quite there, though. We don't really have the design standards specified very clearly here. Now, just for staff, then, where my first point was PUDs are currently allowed, would not be allowed. If the wording were just changed, that there would be no conditional uses until the overlay district is in place, would that meet that same goal? And is that, Commissioner Phelps, that's what you were stating?
It's conditional use related to PUD. You can have other conditional uses possible.
Okay, no conditional use related to PUDs until the overlay district is in place. If that's better wording and meets the same goal, that's a fine substitution for me.
Well, I don't think there's probably too much of a danger of having a lot of PUD applications as in reflecting back over the last 3 decades. We really haven't had that many. The application process is burdensome and costly, and most developers don't want to be bothered doing it. It's just not worth it.
Maybe what we're talking about here is an area as defined on a map where the density is 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, so we have to determine that. And wherein rezones would only be considered with special limitations that dealt with natural resource features and open space, similar to, put the words in there somehow. And conditional uses related to PUDs would not be allowed. You would keep the sewage boundary as it is right now. So what's happening is you're moving away from an overlay district. You can certainly do them if you want, but it's just simply specifying this is what you want out of this area in terms of development. And it's not contingent upon something else happening. It tells the developer and tells the state and the city what it is you expect.
Okay. Well, what's your conclusion, Mr. Weddleton, that we're going to do with LU6?
Well, I would think in fairness, Mr. Joker should address my points 4 and 5.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Weddleton, the comments are germane and important. That there is a big, real fear that people will face the cost for public utilities even if they don't want them or need them. I think it's important for the Commission to be reminded of the 3 ways by which water and sewer services, municipal water and sewer services are expanded within the service area that is allowed either by the Hillside Wastewater Management Plan or by the certificated area. One way to do that is for the utility to have a desire to connect portions of its service area to provide better service to existing customers. In that case, the Assembly would have to approve such a project, and then people that lived along the alignment could have the opportunity to hook up to the system and be levied upon connection of their maybe levied an assessment upon connection of their property to the public water and sewer system. The levy upon connection is very important to note. There's no requirement for those folks to be connected, and there's no requirement for those folks to pay for a portion of that assessment or pay for that assessment at all until the time of that connection takes place. An interesting project took place in Chugiak here last year. We had an isolated system in Connectview that the utility purchased, and we wanted to build a connection to the Eklutna water line. Because of concerns about the prospective cost to homeowners and parcel owners along the route of the intertie between Connectview and the Eklutna project, the project was delayed for over 2 years. As a result of discussions and fears of this high cost, it turned out that the Assembly actually approved the project, and we moved ahead with the project this spring. Since that time, 7 out of the 12 properties along the route have applied for connection. So there might be a lot of discourse about fear of this cost, but in the case of Connectview, where the project was held up for 2 years on the basis of property owner concerns, it appears that some of the property owners' concerns were unfounded, and they went ahead and said, public water is a good thing, we want to hook up. And some of the assessment costs were considerable. They're $14,000 to $55,000. But people accepted those costs without blinking once the opportunity came around. A second means of expanding the system is through a private development agreement. And in this case, a private developer would assume all the costs of construction of an extension to his private development. The private developer, according to our tariff, does have the opportunity to be reimbursed a portion of the development costs for parcels that are benefited by the property, but only for 3 years. If a person did not want to be provided sewer service or water service along the alignment between existing municipal facilities and the private development, he doesn't have to hook up, and there's no charge. If he waited 3 years, he could hook up without an assessment in any case. So in the case of a private development or a utility-led development, we're talking about levy upon connection, not a fear that somebody would be unduly burdened. Now, the third approach is one that people relate to the most, and that appears to cause the greatest amount of fear. And that is when an improvement district assembles itself and creates a project that will provide local water and or sewer service to a concise, bounded set of properties. And I think this is the concern that Mr. Weddington raises, in that an assessment district could be construed such that people that did not want to participate would still be outvoted by their neighbors and be forced to pay an assessment. In this case, it's true that all of the property owners within an improvement district would be assessed whether or not they hook up. However, well, not our success, but the success of improvement districts as a means of implementing expansions to the water and sewer service area in Anchorage in recent years has been abysmal. We go to a lot of effort to put together improvement districts for people that express an interest, but the fact is they hardly ever pass. I can't quote you the statistics, but I would estimate that if we have 1 or 2 every couple or 3 years of improvement districts compared to 4 or 5 that we actually put on the ballot, I'd be surprised if that rate of success was that high. There are opportunities to engineer the service provisions, and the idea is to create the boundary of the service area such that the properties are well served by the improvement district, by the extension. But there are opportunities to approach that in different ways, such that property owners that are truly uninterested can stay out of the improvement district. But in any case, it's almost moot because the prospects for passing an improvement district are very small. So I don't think that there may be a big concern and a real fear, but I don't think it's well-founded. With respect to neighborhood systems have a great place in parts of the country that are suburban areas that are too far remote or are permit limited, so they can't connect to the major municipal facilities that they are contiguous with or next to. But in those cases where there's subsurface disposal of a large number of lots, it's typically in a situation where you have homogeneous geology, you have flat lands, and you have relatively consistent frost depth. In Minnesota and Iowa, throughout much of the eastern parts of the country, there are communities of 20, 30, 50, 100 community systems that provide disposal through a subsurface drain field. These are not the hillside. The hillside, as we're all aware, is an area of very complex geology, very complex hydrogeology, and as we've seen, developments occur that disturb the land surface and create new drainage issues. One of our fears is that the accumulation of drainage from several different wells and several different sources and disposed of in a community drain field will exacerbate the drainage issues that are prone to take place with new development without very careful engineering. A concern about the neighborhood systems is that in regions like we have, they are bound to fail sooner or later. And one of the concerns is that the utility would be the entity that would be tapped to be the cavalry and save the day. And we're not interested in putting that burden on our ratepayers. We're interested in having a clean line between where neighborhood systems would be allowed and where public systems would be allowed. The issue in Fluor Creek is one where a patchwork of systems could arise from having a combination of neighborhood systems and municipal water and sewer service. That goes against the concept of certificated service areas. We're talking about a community of septic systems that might be 6, might be a dozen, might be 2 dozen customers. In essence, a separate utility from the water and wastewater utility. Here we have a patchwork where we might, as a water utility, find it in the best interest of our customers to cross an area that we don't serve with a pipe to get to the area that we do serve. In which case we have a pipe that extends some distance without any customers relatively uselessly. So we want to make sure that we provide efficiency in our delivery of services for our customers throughout the developing area and throughout our service area. We also have an issue with confusion. If we have a patchwork of customers and non-customers within an area like in Fluor Creek, if there's an emergency response action, is it a neighborhood cluster system that has to deal with it, or is it AWW that gets a call out only to find out that it's not part of our system? We'd like to have a clear boundary that's part and parcel of why the certificated boundary exists. There's also a question of equitability. We think about the water service. We think about if you have a city water service, you have hydrants providing water for fire protection. If you're on an adjacent parcel and you don't have municipal water service, is it appropriate for you to ask that water from that hydrant put your fire out? I'm not sure that it is, despite the fact that it would be the humane thing to do. So the fact that we've got equitability issues, we've got emergency response issues, we've got efficiency issues, seems to me that the arguments are pretty clear why we don't want to mix apples and oranges and have neighborhood cluster systems and municipal water and sewer service in the same neighborhood. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Ms. Pease.
Just a very concise question on point number 4. If it's very unlikely that the special assessment district, improvement district is going to be used, then would there be any harm in saying we will not use it? It seems to me that looking at the map of parcels, you could draw a boundary that would serve some of the larger developers and rope in some of the smaller lot owners that might not want to. And if you say that's rarely done, what's the harm in just saying we won't do it?
I'm not sure we'd never even have that option because of our tariff. I would have no problem in having the commission make that a condition of passage of the plan or some other land use activity, but I'm not sure that the utility can refuse to develop as an improvement district an improvement district.
Sorry, that wasn't the way I maybe misspoke. That's not the way Mr. Weddleton's language reads. It's if you use an assessment district, you won't add any of the property owners that don't want to be in it. In other words, his wording is if a conservation subdivision using public water and sewer is planned, property owners outside of that development will not be added to this assessment district for water or sewer without their consent. So he's saying, I believe, you can have an assessment district, but you can't add on additional owners to it unless they each vote. It's got to be, each one has the right to refuse to be in it.
I think that's a potential condition for the district plan or for the area. Again, I'm not sure that our tariff can constrain us because our mandate is to create a project that makes engineering sense, and to the extent that we can fashion the district such that the people that are less willing to be served are not served, I think that's fine. We will work toward that end. But it may not be completely under our control to develop an improvement district that eliminates all of the people and all the parcels that don't want to have service.
I think there's a whole section of the Anchorage Municipal Code that deals with special assessment districts and how they're formed and that process, and it's totally out of the control of the utility. And there's nothing that we could do to put language in here, as far as I know, that could override that section of the municipal code. Also, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska governs to a fair extent who utilities that are required to serve by virtue of their certificated service areas.
That's correct, Madam Chair. The code and the tariff are in alignment with respect to how assessment districts can be formed and how the process of development takes place.
Right. So I think we need to tread carefully when we're dealing with language of this type, because it's not something that's planning has much jurisdiction over. Are there other questions for Mr. Jokelet? Mr. Weddleton, I see you're next in the queue, and then Mr. Morrison.
I've had this discussion before through many CAC meetings. We've talked about this, so I'm not going to debate on this, but only to point out that while these statements, Mr. Jokelet's statements, are consistent with the water utility has stated throughout the plan, really, neighborhood systems have been approved for the rest of the hillside. So that is a particularly pessimistic view of the technology and not shared by the majority of the planners putting this together and the majority of the citizens who were part of it or the consultants who construct these systems throughout the country. It is also, the neighborhood system has also been the law of the land for almost 3 decades through the Hillside Wastewater Management Plan. So that, you can look at these very pessimistically, but in fact, they're allowed through the rest of the Hillside District in this plan. It happened for many, many years. That's correct?
The state code allows for them now.
Right.
One of the issues is that the state doesn't have the resources to deal with those things effectively, and there is, as a result, not an appropriate level of regulatory oversight or design, construction, maintenance, and administrative capability. Not that the state is intended to do all those things, that the design, construction, maintenance, and administrative oversight or administrative capability should land with the people that are served by such systems. But the fact is that despite the fact that the present state regulations allow for that development, it's very rare, and there are, in fact, I know of absolutely no community systems of the type that we're talking about on the hillside now.
But there's none on the hillside, but there are in other parts of the state.
Well, I think that the case and the extent of the development of community systems is actually overstated in the Hillside District Plan. There was examples of Chugiak, there's examples in Big Lake, there's examples of other parts of the state where systems have been approved, but there's no operating experience. In fact, of the systems that are approved, they haven't been fully constructed yet. So I think that the jury is still out on the effectiveness of such systems for our conditions, and our experience has been the country and United States experience, where we took over a community system because it failed.
That was one instance, and what we learned in the course of developing this plan was that failure is largely a management failure. But I do agree. I mean, this plan doesn't actually, it has as a goal doing these neighborhood systems, but does have quite a few stipulations that not until regulations are in place and that there would be a regulatory authority. So those points.
Mr. Morrison, it's your turn.
Thank you for your explanation. I really appreciate you taking the time to go over that. It helped out a lot. You pointed out one of the communities where the systems came in, and I think you said there were 7 out of 12 that opted for the service. Do you think that was entirely on their choice, or do you think it was a financial choice that came from the mortgage lenders as they get ready to sell or as they get ready to refinance or something along those lines?
The refinancing was an issue that was brought up during the discussion. I don't have knowledge as to what the motivation of those people that applied for service has been. But if it was a financial decision, then I would submit that property's worth more when it has public water and sewer attached to it.
Well, I think the point I was just trying to make is sometimes when you go to sell your property, if there is sewer available, you have to hook up, or the banks will not finance in some cases, is, I think, part of the concern. When I listened to the testimony on the tapes, one of the major concerns I heard from the Farrell Creek area is the residents being concerned that they were going to be forced to have to hook up when they, in fact, had a good operating well and a good operating draining system. And I guess my concern is that if we move forward on this, we have a lot of residents in that area that are very concerned of the cost versus benefit and being forced into doing that. And I'm not sure how to address that. So maybe if we have some ideas there, it would be helpful. But thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Dracula? Apparently not. Thank you for coming forward.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Now, Mr. Weddleton, you still have the floor on this one.
Well, I'd like to, am I making a motion or?
Well, you
in
can.
A casual environment here. Well, I would move that we accept staff's changes subject to the 5 conditions I propose. However, I would replace that first condition with the phrasing, no conditional use related to PUDs would be allowed until the overlay district is in place. And in number 4, I would delete where I have PUD, and I would also change assessment district to improvement district. And given that, approve staff's response to issue LU-6.
Okay. And
Motion searching for a second?
well, I'm searching for the motion to be pushed, the button.
Oh, I move. I'm sorry. So I should have clicked it. My bad.
Well, now I've got Ms. Pease making the motion and Mr. Phelps, but I'll still...
Was seconded.
Okay. Okay. There you go. Okay. And now I see Mr. Weddleton made the motion and Mr. Phelps has seconded and Ms. Pease is just in the queue to talk after Mr. Weddleton does. Okay.
Mr. Weddleton, you would want the staff recommendations with that perimeter setback clarification that I asked for?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then you're okay with your change to, start over, with the change to your first item? Will there be 5 acre PUDs then?
I believe the phrasing Commissioner Phelps offered, no conditional use related to PUDs would be allowed until the overlay district is in place, meets that same need, and
Okay.
seems to work.
Thank you. I guess I think this sells me on it. I was not sure about it previously and looking for ways to maybe pare it back a little bit as a kind of experiment to see if the idea could work for the neighborhood. But I think the protections in here are sufficient that there's still a lot of opportunities for the neighbors to be involved. So,
Mr. Phelps?
Yeah, I'm going to oppose the motion.
Okay.
Can I speak to that now? Or?
You sure can.
Okay. I really don't think that items 4 and 5 are something that we should be dealing with. We should be dealing with the land use, not the financing and the improvement aspects of it. I'm not even sure that we can say something like this and be consistent with the municipal code or the state requirements. And so I feel uncomfortable with items 4 and 5. I'm also uncomfortable with the idea of an overlay district because I don't see what you're gaining by an overlay district when you can simply sell what it is you want to have inside that area. If you want to develop in those areas for the public, you can certainly do that, but an overlay district is a fairly difficult thing to accomplish. And, you try and do the easiest thing as opposed to more difficult tasks. And so there's easier ways of achieving the concept of an overlay district than actually developing an overlay district. So I think there's an alternative way of doing this. It still goes to the point that Mr. Banton is describing, but I don't think this is the way of doing it.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion?
I can also suggest some language, but maybe that occurs later.
Well, I'm open to an amendment. To meet if you can give me wording that would meet the goals of the overlay.
Here's what I put down, okay? This is what I was writing out. I would call it the Furrow Creek Reserve Area, okay? You have to have a name on the map, okay? And so right now, it's the overlay district. I would just call it the reserve area because that kind of gives the impression that it's not exactly development. It's kind of like held in abeyance, if you will, until things are figured out. And this is the wording that I would have. Development in this area, being the reserve area, shall average not more than 2 dwellings per acres and shall be setting standards to ensure that no development is built with current residential areas, including use of conservation, subdivision approach, protection of stream corridors, pedestrian connections, and substantial buffers. Until specific standards are developed, conditional use applications for the PUD shall not be accepted. The maximum perimeter of sewer service shall not be extended until there is a determination that land use at the higher levels of density are appropriate.
So that's offered as a friendly amendment. I think I'm going to hear from staff or is there a proposal?
No, it will actually replace yours, and it would not be a friendly amendment.
So we need to put this up to the test.
Yeah, you're going to have to vote on it. But I would suggest a different approach that gets you the same thing.
I'm used to the idea of the overlay district because we've kicked that around for so many months. Now, your approach may work, but I'd have to let that sink in. Okay.
Well, I think we need to...
That's staff's opinion, maybe. Can I?
Excuse me?
Well, I guess we got staff's opinion, though, on it.
Yeah. Well, we can always ask staff's opinion, but we can also vote on the motion that's on the floor and then address another motion. No, there isn't.
No.
There's not. Yes. Okay, well, there is objection to the motion that Mr. Weddleton made, so we're going to vote on it. And Mr. Phelps, would you be so kind, or Mr. Weddleton, to show Mr. Morrison where his voting machine is?
I'm not sure I know.
It should be on his left, I think.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, there it is.
Yes.
We're in the committee of the whole. Can we actually do...
Yes. Yeah, we can do anything in the committee of the whole.
We've done that before.
Yeah.
Cases like this.
Yes. Okay, so
Did we break them out for votes afterwards? Is that right? We went through everything in...
But we're taking care of this one right now.
That's fine.
Yeah, we're taking care of this one right now. Okay. Did you figure out your voting machine?
She doesn't have...
I think the last one to vote doesn't get a vote. You have to push quicker. You can pound that all day long.
Huh. Voice vote?
Sure, my vote is no.
I have voted. I did. Well, I don't show up either. This is sabotage. I voted no also. Okay. I know, you know what? I know exactly why our votes didn't register. Because I told you to use the voting machine and we are supposed to touch the no on our screen. Oh, well, I misguided you anyway. I'm pushing a button that's no longer active. Okay. Anyway, that motion fails. So, we have not dealt with that issue, and rather than spending any more time on it now, we're going to come back to that after the fact like we often do. All right, so LU6, we have to come back to. Come back.
We can't, have a substitute motion now?
We can. Well, it's fresh in our brain, I guess. If you want to push the button.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to basically do what I said before, which is basically to define the map, on the map as a Furrow Creek Reserve Area, to specify that the dwelling units per acre on the map is 1-2 dwelling units per acre. That's consistent with Mr. Littleton's approach. And the wording that I would use, this is not necessarily the exact wording, but it's the concept that I have, is that development in this area, meaning the reserve area, shall average not more than 2 dwelling units per acres, and shall be subject to standards to ensure that new developments fit with current residential areas, including the use of conservation subdivision design approaches, the protection of stream corridors, pedestrian connections, and the use of substantial buffers between residential areas and important natural features. Until specific standards are developed, conditional use applications for a PUD shall not be accepted. Yeah. The maximum perimeter sewage service is to remain at its current boundary and may only be increased to encompass the remainder of the Furrow Creek area when the determination is made that organized sewage is required for this area, or portions of this area. So what this basically is doing...
Okay, let's see if we have a second for that.
Okay.
I have to have you push the button that you made the motion, Bruce.
Okay.
Okay, now I need somebody to second. Thank you, Ms. Pease. Okay?
Can I speak to it now?
Yes, you
okay.
can.
The reason I've worded it this way, I tried to keep a lot of the concepts that have been proposed, but I'm not certain that we're going to have overlay districts. They take a long time to develop. In the interim, I think you need to have an expression of what you want in this area. I think that, what I basically did is take the wording from the staff's analysis as to why they think area development should fit with these areas. And basically, there's language that they've used, and I've taken that language and stuck it in here. And we talked about the interest we have not to have PUDs. That is dealt with in terms of not accepting applications. And I think the concept of maximum sewage is also dealt with in terms of a phasing approach. In other words, don't change it now. You can change it when it is determined that it's appropriate for sewage inside this area. By sewage, I mean organized sewage, not septic systems. So that's kind of the concept behind it. Now, if you want to develop an overlay district, I suppose you can. I just don't think you need to.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just sorry to interrupt, but my screen does not appear to be letting me know when I need to request to speak. So I'm having a hard time letting you know.
Okay. In other words, you can't push.
I've been, and you don't respond, so I'm...
No, all right, because you don't show up here.
Yeah, sorry. But
That's okay then. Just do whatever you need to do to get my attention. Ms. Dean. Now I see you.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I am going to disagree with Mr. Phelps, and I would like to keep the language the same as what the city has written. I disagree with community water and wastewater systems. I've had bad experiences with them. I don't have any problem with the way that the city has written their existing information.
Okay. Any further discussion? Yes. Okay, you're first before in the queue before Mr. Weddleton. So.
I yield to Mr. Weddleton. I want to hear his take. He's given this more thought than I have.
Well, I had a question for Commissioner Phelps. In your writing, then the staff has presented a couple pages here with the outlines, and particularly this chart that has the minimum parcel size, where if you get 8 acres together, you can do 2 units per acre. If you get 12, you can do 3 units per acre. Were you including this as part of the proposal, or this is out of it?
I would say the maximum is 2 units per acre.
Okay, you also, we said that it would be on the land use map shown as 1 to 2 DUA, or the area would be 1 to 2 DUA, is that correct?
Right, that's correct.
I would propose that it would be the limited intensity 0 to 1 DUA, and then to be consistent with the land use map, the next category would be 1 to 3. So it would probably be better to pick one of those, and the 0 to 1 would seem more consistent.
I thought the intention was to have something less than 3 dwelling unit per acre.
In my proposal, I accepted this chart, where if you got 8, you could do 2 DUA, and if you got 12 acres, you could do 3, and that's what staff has proposed here. But that would be for your conservation subdivision, and the overriding land use designation could still be 0 to 1 DUA.
So if I could, do you feel comfortable with the staff recommendation in terms of how it would be developed according to this chart? Is that what I'm hearing?
I was comfortable with that with the restrictions I had placed. So less comfortable without more constraints. Your statement if the overriding land use was shown as 0 to 1 DUA, and now did you express all the standards, or are you stating that those are general standards and
Those are general standards. So if you have a development coming in, they're going to have to meet those particular standards, but you don't specify exactly what they are. If you develop overlay district and you have specific standards, then obviously those would apply. But until you have an overlay district, you have to have something stated. That's what this does.
Okay. Yeah, I want to support it with more detail on the standards, like how wide the buffers would be. Are we talking L4?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can get into all the specificity.
And that's where taking the time to go to the community and developing the overlay district, I felt more comfortable with, because you get more specific standards.
You can certainly go to the community and develop a more specific standard. This is not precluding that. It's basically silent on it. What I'm concerned about is that it says with an overlay district, it is the assumption you're going to have an overlay district. That's an assumption. You may not have an overlay district. So what do you do in the interim? This basically specifies if you can have a subdivision come in or some development, you're going to be getting in a subdivision that's going to have real low densities at 2 DUA per on average, and they're going to have to be using these techniques right here. And the reason I picked the conservation subdivision approach is because that's a concept that's utilized right now, although we don't have a conservation subdivision specifically for the hillside yet. We're kind of tied because we don't have all these things yet, and yet when you have a development in this area, you want to ensure that they practice Bovance design.
Okay.
Right. I think prior to having the overlay district, you would just have the status quo as it is now, be regular R6 lots developed as they normally are. Once the overlay district is made, then you would allow these special conservation subdivisions.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, my concept is I'm not assuming that I think you're going to have the possibility for rezonings. I mean, that's what this is doing here, is that if you have, I forget what it's called, but if you have this district here, it's basically saying that there's a possibility for higher density inside this area. And it's not going to be necessarily an R6 area. That's what's happening here. So it's kind of like a transitional area. So if you don't want to have any transition, you stick with the R6 zoning.
Ms. Pease.
I'm muddled enough listening to this language that I'm wondering if we should have this in writing before we vote on it. It's a pretty important issue. I would otherwise need to hear Mr. Phelps reread his motion again before we vote for certain. But, and I guess I'm also I think that, I'm lost at this point.
Okay, I'm going to withdraw my motion at this point. It's just getting too difficult to make a determination, so I'll withdraw my motion.
I think we're not going to deal with this tonight. I think we're going to move on, and I think we're going to not, I think we're not making much progress. And so we're going to work for maybe a little while longer, or not much longer, maybe another 30 minutes, and then we're going to come up with a plan. Because
Can I take a 3-minute break?
Yes, you may take a break.
Oh.
Anyone else that needs to take a break, feel free to get up, stretch your legs. We're pausing. Have a plan. Here's what I would like to propose. Due to the lateness of the hour and the fact that we've made such fantastic progress this evening, I would like to propose this, that we cease all action on this tonight except for I would like us to come out of the committee of the whole and approve in our official capacity, all of those things that we had no objection to in this, so staff can move forward with that, and the one or two things that we agreed to that had been pulled. And let staff then move those onward. Then what I would like to propose would be for Ms. Pease, Mr. Weddleton, and since Mr. Phelps has been so helpful tonight, for him to join the dynamic duo and to perhaps meet with staff to work some of these things out. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, I think it's important to do with staff, though, because I hate to do this stuff at night on the fly.
I understand.
I would much prefer to do with staff.
And so I would appreciate if the three of you could find times to meet with staff and work through these. We are not going to start up the sausage mill again. The blades in the sausage grinder are very dull.
Very dull.
Right now. And so it would be my hope that with all of your expertise and wisdom, you could have refined some of these things when it comes back to us. Yes, we will, but we'll do that when we're functioning officially. Do not let me forget, Madam Secretary.
Madam Chair, move that we move out of the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Is there any objection? No. That's great. We're now back conducting official business. Okay, I need a motion.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Isham. If you push your button.
Yeah, and here's what I move that we go through and approve those items, either officially approve those items for incorporation that we've either approved in the Committee of the Whole, or I will go through and basically read the numbers.
That would be good.
Write down the list, and if anybody thinks that I'm giving a wrong number, holler, and I will withdraw that particular number. So, starting on page 1, move for approval of issue G1 with the decisions that we made in the Committee of the Whole.
No, it's all one motion.
Yeah. Okay, G2. G3.
But why do we have to go through it all over again if we already...
Pardon me?
Why do we have to go through all the numbering again if we've already gone through it? Because the chairman...
I want to make sure that we're reading it right. You guys need to check me.
But there's a lot to go through.
You can't read it fast.
It'll go fast. I'm not going to talk about it.
We really need to get it in the record.
Yeah. So, G1, G2, G3, G4, G5...
G5A.
G5A, G5B, G5C, G5D,
G5E.
G5E, right, Nancy agreed to that. Okay.
G5-6A.
No, that was pulled. And did we agree to pull the photos on that? That's all we wanted to pull? Did we agree to that?
Yes, and we agreed to put the two maps on there.
Okay, all right. G6A, G6B, G6C, G6D, G6E, G7A, B, C, D, and F. There was no E. Okay. All right. LU 2, 3, 4. I got an okay on 5, Nancy?
Yes.
Okay.
And 6.
6 with no.
No.
7 no.
And that's where we...
Okay.
6 is a no.
Yeah, 7 is a no. LU 8, LU 10, LU 12.
I had that as objecting. Somebody objected on 12, I thought.
Just a minute, I've got, no, I had no objection on mine.
Okay.
Okay.
So LU 12. LU 18, LU 21, LU 23, 24, 25, 26A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. There's two LU 27s, the second LU 27 at the bottom of the page 27. And there's another LU 27.
Just a second,
Okay.
Secretary's
Okay,
law. We
Secretary's
need to
law.
stop a minute.
Okay, wait.
Okay, there are two LU 27s on
On
page
page
27.
The bottom one.
The second one.
Yeah. And
Okay.
and then there's another LU 27 at the top of page 28. That's okay. And then LU 28. LU 30. Okay, D 3, 4, 6, 7, 8A, 9, D10, D11, D12, 13, D16, D19.
So D15 was not included?
D15 is
Just a minute.
15
I had pulled
was
that.
pulled by 14, 15 was pulled by John.
John Weddleton.
Weddleton pulled 15. Okay, so we're at 15. Okay, D19, D21, D23, D24A, B, okay. We're into the R's now. Let's see, R. Okay, R, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17, 19.
16.
Just a second. Okay.
16,
Just a minute. 13, 14, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
14. I had 15 pulled by Nancy, and
Yeah,
16 was pulled by
Nancy.
Nancy also.
Okay, that looks reasonable.
So it's 17, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23.
Uh-huh.
Actually, let's add 21. It has a tangent, and there's another issue. So don't approve that. It ties in with another issue that would have been hit earlier. Let's pull
Okay,
that.
so delete 21 as an approval.
Okay. Okay. So now we're on to
Under the
transportation.
T's. T1. It looks like T2, Bruce, you originally pulled it, then you changed your mind, and now it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I want T1. I want to pull.
You want T1 pulled?
Yeah.
Okay. But you're okay with T2 approving?
Yes.
Okay, approve
Okay.
T2. T5, T7, T8, T9, T10, T12, T14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21A, 21C, 21D.
Oh, 21B I thought I had pulled. I meant to.
You did.
You pulled 21B like in boy.
Yeah. 21 deltas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now we're on
Okay,
page
on to
71.
W's. W2, 3, 7, 8, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, A, B, and E13. And going to chapter 6, I2, I6, I7, I9, I10, I11, I12, I13, I15, I16, I17, I18, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and G again, and H. I18, J, K, L, M, O, P, Q.
There's N.
Somebody had...
N was pulled by John.
I don't have that marked. M or N?
And
Nancy, November.
Nellie, okay. Nellie. Okay.
Yeah, I think there was a general issue I wanted to discuss on
Okay.
that one. So in
Okay, then
18N.
118O.
Okay, O, P, Q, R, and S.
Okay. And now I need a second for the motion. Mr. Morrison, thank you. Would you care to speak to your motion, Mr. Isham?
Well, we made this decision in the committee of the whole, and so it
Yes.
represents the will of the group.
It does. Any further discussion? I think the motion speaks for itself. Any objection? Hearing none, that is approved. Mr. Weddleton.
So the subcommittee, what are we tasked to look at everything that was not approved here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And do we have a proposed meeting date, the 16th? That's a Wednesday night, ladies and gentlemen. And we won't know where just yet because they'll have to find a room for us. Oh, it'll be here. We've already got that room that night. Oh, okay. It would be normally the second plating board meeting, but they don't have a plating board meeting that night, so we can come and meet. And regular time, 6:30. September 16.
So that's a Wednesday.
That's a Wednesday.
We'll meet here.
Yes.
As a body or as the subcommittee?
As a body. Your subcommittee's going to need to meet before then.
Okay, so we'll have a meeting on Wednesday the 16th.
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll also have a planning commission meeting on Monday the 14th. So we're going to be meeting twice that week, is what it means.
Oh, boy.
No, we're not meeting next Monday. It's Labor Day. It's a municipal holiday.
Labor Day is actually September 14th and 16th, right?
So we're making up for it.
Now, the subcommittee is dealing with that one issue or with all the issues that were pulled? I didn't get
All
that.
the issues that were pulled.
No, I'm withdrawing my name.
No, Mr. Phelps, you have special expertise,
Yeah, right.
Alan.
Yeah, okay.
And you are the perfect participant. And you just had so much to offer tonight. I think, Mr. Hamilton, are you in the queue to say something? And
I was, but I
ignoring
spoke.
you? I'm sorry. I think a motion to adjourn would be in order in a minute. Mr. Isham?
Just a comment that these subcommittees that we set up seem to work fairly well. We did that thing with the residential thing, and we ground through it and without tying everybody else's time up. So it's a way to get quite a bit accomplished.
It really is.
With the staff doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah. But those recommendations were approved by the Assembly, were they?
Actually, I think they've been adopting in their committee a lot of what we put forward. And some of our commissioners have been going to those meetings, like John and Jim and Connie, and have been moving along. I want to express my gratitude to our new members that are here tonight and for jumping right in.
Thank you for allowing us to be part of this.
Well, you both jumped right in tonight and began participating, and that's awesome. We're just glad to have you be part of the group. We've been shorthanded for quite a while, and very much appreciate you volunteering for the cause.
Can I ask a question or make an observation? Some of us are off the commission October the 14th, so...
This year?
Yeah,
Well,
this year.
I'm assuming you're going to express your interest that you'd like to continue.
Well, I did, but I'm not sure it's going to be accepted. The point I'm trying to make is that it would be wise, I think, to get through the hillside plan by the 14th, because you have the continuity. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of new people on, at least 2 new people potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, who else's term is up?
Stacy's is
Habitat guy,
at this point. Well, presumably you were appointed for more than a month.
No.
Yeah.
She was reappointed already.
Yeah.
But I hope the first appointment wasn't intended to be for a month. You get a month. Read all that stuff and that's it.
Short timer. Short timer. Anyway, well, thank you all for coming out this evening. Mr. Phelps, anyway, Ms. Pease, we need the motion to adjourn. It's made. Is there any objection? I guess if we're silent, that means nobody objects to going home. We're adjourned.